It's been pretty good, but my sister right now is on that.
Yep.
It was just it's kind of normal.
Okay,
No,
okay, but no COVID concerns.
no.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
How are you?
Just a little wet, really, a little soggy.
Yeah. I was driving and I hit this really good tunnel and it's like all over my car. I'm like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yep.
I don't see anything on board book yet, but we do have a meeting
I'm
on
on a mission this year.
23rd still, don't we?
because of
Yeah.
COVID.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find the tackiest Christmas decoration.
23rd.
ever. And so before I left, my
13th.
kids were in the basement.
Right.
and I had
13th.
Well,
Yep,
that's the
13th 's
special
that
meeting
quick
on
one.
Friday, and the 23rd is our
23rd
next
is a Monday?
regular meeting.
Yep.
Oh,
Like
yes.
white reindeer, their decorations, and I set them on the kitchen table and put them up. Looks like they're cute. And then all the
Only
lights
because
go
I'm
off,
going
so when
back
you
up
come
next
the driveway, all you
Wednesday
can
and
see is
seeing if I can actually get
the kitchen table.
near normal temperatures
I
instead of
think it's
70s.
hysterical,
thing
they
out of my
probably
purse,
will
I'm
not
like,
be
where is
impressed.
this?
No.
I stopped and right up there and bought 120 pounds of ice at Sam's Club when I talked to you,
I did.
and
I
I
did.
was surprised.
So if you could just
I
respond.
still have all 6
Oh, yeah.
bags.
Oh, okay. I
Wow,
missed
it made it?
I had this much water melted down in the bottom of the cooler, and they were all in there yet.
Oh, there you are.
I wrapped them in
Wow.
my
Whatever.
thick rubber mat that's in the back of Suburban. I laid that over it. I had another heavy blanket, and then a big rug I put over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
And it's like
And you say it went back in the freezer.
I know. I don't like how it does it.
Next time, maybe.
Good job.
And I really don't like it on my phone.
Yeah.
You're like all crooked.
Because on my
Like,
phone, then it
something
looks like
better
my
than
response
nothing.
is
And so your
We need
sister,
to.
in the
state
middle.
where she's at.
Blanca?
Kind of goofy looking.
She does when she
Oh, yeah.
when we do roll.
Okay.
I'll do a.
Yes.
We'll go through for roll. I'll say.
Okay.
I'll just go.
You'll just say that we're all in attendance and with.
And then ask for her to announce where she's from, where you're from. Oh, she went
I'm
off.
supposed to go visit her over there, like drive over there, but.
Or you can do that too. It's all
Either way.
present. She just has to post where she's attending from right now.
Congratulations.
We're probably live.
Okay.
More time together.
Yeah.
Yay.
Got in dry.
I think we're,
The rain when I left my house, I thought, there's no way I'm gonna get in that building.
I think we're live, just so you're aware. I think we're live.
We are.
We are.
Okay. Yeah. Good. I'm buying a house can be stressful, but that's exciting for her.
She said that it's kind of late for her because she hasn't really watched any of her services yet. But
Yeah.
sure, it's all like that.
Good.
Recruit the bench teacher. Oh, that's good. That's so cool.
It's new to me. Oh, awkward. Excuse me.
All set. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are the Owatonna School Board. This is Monday, it's November 9th. Tonight, it's 5:30, and tonight we are in a work session. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask that you all please rise and join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we start the meeting, ask Eric for the attendance.
We are all present, and Christina, can you announce where you're at tonight from a remote?
Your address.
Sure, I am calling in from home, 562 Agnes Street.
Thanks,
in
Christy.
Owatonna.
Thank you.
Christina, we appreciate that. First item up tonight, as part of the agenda, would be to approve the agenda. We'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor with an aye? Any opposed? And motion carries. Item 4 tonight begins with item A, which is an update, several items for Mr. Elstad to begin with regarding the COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So tonight's COVID update is going to be a little more extensive than what we previously had. So I wanted to walk through kind of our current situation of where we're at in our school district. And then I also want to explore with you some options that we have in front of us. I have asked a couple of folks to come and help with this conversation tonight. So I'm going to ask that Amy Karen, who is our Steele County Public Health Administrator, to come into the meeting, and she's going to be seated up here. Amy, welcome. Thanks for being here at our board meeting tonight. First and foremost, I'd let all of our board members know that it's very important that our relationship and collaboration with Steele County Public Health has been fantastic. And the services that Amy Karen and her staff have provided us have been second to none. And we've been in weekly meetings together. I think we feel like we're almost on the same, we work in the same spot right now. But it's been just fantastic to have this collaboration because Amy and her staff bring an expertise that we simply don't have. And so I appreciate Amy being here tonight and helping us with this discussion as well. To give you a current idea as to where we're at in our county, because if you remember back on July 30th when the Safe Learning Plan was first issued by Governor Walz, county case data was really the only data we had. And so with that, Amy was very good at collecting that and still does so on a weekly basis for us about specimen collection, number of positive cases, positivity rates, things of that nature. Looking at our latest case data, what was released last Thursday is, remember, about 2 weeks old. So that would have been the cases that would have been reported October 10 through October 24 led us to 29.2 cases in Steele County per 10,000 residents. What we believe we're going to see coming in this Thursday is and that's again when they're reported, is that what we're going to see is the specimens collected 10/17 to 10/31 are going to be somewhere north of 36 cases per 10,000. If you remember, we were over 30. We were about at 35.9 the week before. We've gone down to 20, now 29.2. We're going back up to somewhere north of 36. We've had the last week and a half have been. There's been a lot of cases reported, and Amy reported earlier today that on a typical week, we were seeing somewhere between 35
to 35,
something like that.
cases a week. Yep.
And the last week and a half, we've seen nearly 165 cases in Steele County. So the case numbers are on the rise, which means that if we were to forecast a number looking forward to what would be reported by the state on the 19th of November, we're probably going to be closer to 60 or more cases in Steele County. Now, that being said, it's important to remember that that's one piece of data because Amy and her leadership and guidance have been clear with us that sometimes those cases can show up in a business that's maybe not related to a school. They can show up in congregate living. They can show up in a number of different places. And so we've been working together to decide, are those numbers letting us know that we need to find a different learning model, or can we continue moving forward in our current learning model? As we start to see things change quickly within our school district, we're going to have to toggle to make some changes as we're looking at school-specific data along with the county data and the positivity rate. The positivity rate we like to keep at about 5% or less. That's one what the Department of Health has asked us. I think in Steele County, we're going to be really inching towards about 15% with positivity. So we're starting to see this hit. It's now no longer kind of metro-centric. We're seeing it in outstate Minnesota, greater Minnesota, and it certainly is showing up in Steele County. I want to add one other piece, and then I'd like to have any questions that you might have for Amy as well. So as all of you are aware, and most of our parents are aware, today we had to make a decision to move McKinley Elementary to distance learning model. Why does that happen? We based that decision based off of the close contact investigations that we had to conduct over the weekend. We had a number of cases. I think we had 5 new cases that were reported at McKinley over the weekend. which then included contact investigation with students that would have been in the classrooms at McKinley. That also includes staff that are in those classrooms. And so putting all of those close contacts and new case data together, we made the decision that a great number of students would have to be quarantined along with the cases themselves. When looking at the student body, we thought that over 20% of our student body would not be able to attend school in person because, again, a great number of them were quarantined, but we also had cases. I would add one more piece to that, which is they aren't all school generated. We're getting cases now that have been reported at places of business where they have children attending the school, so the children become a close contact, and then we get siblings that are close contacts as well. And so we're starting to see this multiplier effect happen within our community and within our school district. We made the decision with McKinley today. It means that we need to monitor our buildings very closely and make decisions as we go forward. And I have some potential solutions for that, but I want to pause for a moment and just really ask if you have questions of Amy. And Amy, if you have anything to add to this discussion, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about what we're doing locally. So early on, the Minnesota Department of Health did all of our case and trace investigations. So they were contacting all the positive cases. They were also contacting the close contacts. Some of the directors, public health directors across the state, we pushed to get that, to be able to do that locally. We feel like, and I personally believe, that that's a really important piece of this, to get on this right away so that we find our close contacts right away, we get them in quarantine. That's one of our key defenses right now with this virus, is getting those close contacts out, so that we can at least somewhat try to contain the spread that's out there. So we did take that on early on. We don't do all of our case and trace investigation because we do get overwhelmed at some point. And so we just started going into this regional model where other staff people from Department of Health will take that on. Our number, we have some priorities as far as prioritizing cases. We have so many new cases now that we've had to prioritize. I have told our case investigators that our school cases, our school connected cases, are one of our very top priorities, so that we're trying to grab those cases locally before, you know, someone else does out there that doesn't know things locally. That's a priority. A priority is any clusters or outbreak cases in our workplaces, and then our long-term care facilities. So we've been working really hard. Thankfully, with the partnership of all of our schools here in Steele County, we've really been able to, you know, get on those cases pretty quick and get those close contacts. Schools have been really good at identifying those close contacts if they're in school, getting them out of school, so we don't have that spread within school. The problem is the schools are doing a great job, I think, as far as social distancing, wearing the masks, cleaning, disinfecting, having kids wash their hands, the whole works. We can't control what they do outside of those four walls. So that's more what we're seeing, I think, is some of that spread in people's personal lives, such as you just described too. So I just wanted to let you know that we are working hard at the local level. We've reassigned people's more than half of their jobs, some of them, to case and trace investigation because we've made it such a top priority within our local public health, our department. I can tell you over this last week and a half or so, our system has become completely overwhelmed. When you look at 165 new cases a week, we're talking, 30, 40 new cases a day. We are definitely overwhelmed. Our regional model is also showing that we're overwhelmed, and our state. So what's happening is we're not getting to a lot of those positive contacts right away. Usually it'll be within hours when we find out about it. We have some sitting in our queue, and I'll be honest, some sitting in our queue for days now. And so it's going to be more important to get that message out there when somebody knows they're a positive case, to try to identify those close contacts themselves and notify some of those people so that we can stay on top of this. But I just wanted to let you know kind of where we're sitting now. And this is really recently, probably over the last week and a half, where we've just, the system has just become overwhelmed. So we're going to try to keep doing the best that we can do with the resources that we have and the staff that we have without completely burning them out, to be honest with you. So, and I just wanted to reiterate too what Mr. Elstad said, is that We're not just looking at that county rate. Yes, that county rate has spiked way up. We're looking at our positivity rate. We're looking at what's happening in each of those buildings and what's kind of happening in the community and how to make some of those connections. We do have a couple pretty significant large workplace outbreaks right now that's contributing to some of our numbers. I wouldn't say, you can't just look at schools and say it's schools contributing to this. We have some school cases, but when you compare it to our workplace outbreaks, it's significantly less there. And like you said, in our communities, of course, we're going to have that household contact spread, and that's definitely happening, along with just a widespread community spread out there right now.
I was going to add one thing. So when we've been trying to help out Steele County Public Health where we can, so if there's a case identified and the parents or whomever are letting us know that there's been a positive case identified, Amy Jo Havelka, who's our district COVID coordinator and also our lead in our health services department, is helping our school nursing staff to really help coordinate that contact tracing within a building. So, and principals as well have been adding to it. So I'll give you, for instance, we had notification of a positive case on Friday afternoon at about 2:30. What happened then is that principal sat down, sat down with the teacher, they identified what close contacts may have been present, and then the principal and Amy Jo Havelka started calling parents to let them know. So we're helping with some of that contact investigation and letting parents know that they'll need to quarantine their kids because they were a close contact. But as Amy indicated, things are becoming overwhelming even for our staff too, trying to do some of that internal contact investigation. So the next weeks, we've been told by both state and federal experts that the next probably 10 weeks are going to be pretty critical time in managing this community spread that we have. We're going to see spikes. We're going to see things change. It's just important that we retain our collaboration, but also that our community is fully aware that things will change. Things are going to change. And it's about trying to be proactive versus reactive. What I would share with you, though, is when navigating a pandemic, everything feels reactive all the time. We're not even calling it responding, we're reacting because we're hearing a number and all of a sudden things start coming fast and furious and we're forced to make a change. So the other thing I wanted to do, though, is talk a little bit about what have we got planned? Is there any strategy in place with our district so that we can try to do our best to make sure that we're providing good quality learning opportunities for our students without having this huge spread happen in our schools? So I'm going to add one other person to our mix tonight. I'm going to add Mark Ochterkirk because activities are a big part of our discussion. I saw him walk in a few minutes ago. He'll be seated next to Amy, if that's okay. This will be socially distant at the speaker's table. Thank you. But I want to talk a little bit about a proposal that we are proposing. We've been working with Amy on this proposal for a couple weeks now. One of the things we know to be true is that at a recent meeting, I was able to hear Deborah Birx, who works with the White House as a White House epidemiologist, along with Dr. Michael Osterholm and Commissioner of Health Jan Malcolm. They are all indicating that the Thanksgiving holiday is going to be a super spreader event. In fact, Deborah Birx is quoted as saying that there will be 35 million super spreader events in our country on Thanksgiving Day. People are going to gather. That's just going to happen. People are going to gather. Maybe not in the large social gatherings, but even gatherings of 8 to 10 people that are family members that you don't typically spend time with is considered a high-risk gathering. And people can be positive or COVID positive and asymptomatic and not even know that they're spreading. So within that context, we looked at one proactive strategy is that we would ask the board to consider a targeted distance learning week, the week of November 30th through Friday, December 4th. The reason why we're pushing for that is because what we know about the science of how people are contracting COVID and when symptoms show up, typically anywhere between 3 to 7 days after they've come in contact with someone that's positive, they would start to show symptoms. I confirmed that with Dr. Bunker as a local health expert as well. If we were to take that week off, and if people have exposure on Thanksgiving Thursday or even Thanksgiving Friday, there's a good likelihood that by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday the following week, they would become symptomatic. The strategy here is that symptomatic folks generally will stay home because they're sick, or they'll get tested, even better, to find out how they can kind of come back to school and go through their quarantine period or their isolation period. With that strategy in place, we know, and I'm tonight, Medford Public Schools, Blooming Prairie Public Schools, and NRHEG Public Schools are discussing with their school boards as well as part of a county effort, because one of the things that our 4 school districts share is common employment places. I would also share with you that last week I met with the CEOs of our largest employers in the community. They are in full support of moving this initiative forward with the Targeted Distance Learning Week, recognizing that it also impacts their places of employment and employee availability. What we asked for was flexibility. We know that our K-5 learners in our buildings that have to be home during that Targeted Distance Learning Week will require additional care from parents. The employers have stated that they are going to provide the flexibility needed for parents to do that, so that we can accomplish this as a community-wide effort. Now I'm going to backtrack and tell you that that was our plan 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago that we were thinking. We're on a trajectory right now that might lead us to distance learning as a district before we would break for Thanksgiving. We just need to be faithful in monitoring the numbers, but we need to make sure that we're ready for every potential contingency. So I'm going to lay out some potential contingencies that could play themselves out. And I want to be clear for those that are listening and watching. These are strictly hypothetical situations. They are not something that we are making any decisions on tonight. I call them what-if scenarios. What if the numbers continue to spike in our schools, in the district, and we end up believing that we need to go to distance learning starting next week, the 16th of November? What that looks like is Monday the 16th would be a transition day for our teaching staff to toggle to the distance learning model. And then we would commence with distance learning K-12 next Tuesday the 17th. That's one what if. What if our data sort of stays, kind of stays within the margins and doesn't grow a lot? Well, that might lead us to, if we can get to Friday the 20th of November, which is scenario 2 or what if scenario 2. If that's the case, the Monday and Tuesday preceding Thanksgiving would be transition days for our staff, and then we would go through what we've already talked about, which is the Targeted Distance Learning Week, Monday, November 30th through Friday, December 4th. If we're able to hang on through the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, then what we would present as the what-if scenario is we would just then go to the week after Thanksgiving, is what I first talked about in our proposal. So we have a number of contingencies to consider. Within that, though, I just wanted to add before Amy takes off, because I know she's got lots of other places to be tonight as well. But from a county public health perspective, Amy, those strategies about trying to mitigate that spread, is that something that you think is fitting within our need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, because I think if you, I really like this idea that that Mr. Elstad proposed. We meet on a weekly basis with all the superintendents in Steele County, and then we also do the same thing over in Dodge County because I'm the public health director over there. And so he did bring this up to the other superintendents. They've even caught on a little bit over in Dodge County, I think, too now. Mm-hmm. So with taking that week off, not off, but distance learning that week after Thanksgiving, because I think that gives you enough days to kind of see. Usually we tell people if they're close contact to test between 5 and 7 days after exposure. So that kind of meets that criteria. And then you have that 2 to 14 day window kind of where you're most likely to become positive, so, or have the symptoms. So I think that is a great strategy as far as, like you said, at least something kind of proactive, because obviously we've been reactive ever since March with this, honestly. So yeah, I do.
Okay. One thing I wanted to add is that within all of those potential what-if scenarios that I laid out, our intention would be, if the numbers bear out and show that we're making improvements or we're seeing that sort of number of cases start to dive downward again, our intention would be to return on Monday, December 7th into our current learning model, which would be hybrid for secondary, and all in person for our elementary students. But again, there's lots of scenarios that could play in anywhere within those. So anyway, I want to make sure I'm respectful of Amy's time tonight. Board members, do you have any questions for Amy? Anything that needs clarification from a public health standpoint?
Amy, I do. During that week between November 30th and December 4th, presumably the district is going to be pushing out notification to parents of things that we're on the lookout for. And can you help us understand what are some of the things that we'll ask parents to be watching for with their kids?
Well, any of those COVID-like symptoms, which is difficult because it mimics things like flu, allergies, colds, that whole thing. But we would be having them look out for that list of COVID-19 symptoms, and certainly we can help with that language too. That seems to change on us from time to time here. The rules kind of change on us, or the guidelines change on us. But I can say just anecdotally, it's starting to point more and more two very telltale signs, it seems like, is that loss of taste and that loss of smell. Those two seem to be popping up and being huge factors with this, of course, along with the other ones. And then we do have those asymptomatic people. It'll be interesting after this week when we get those results back from our community testing event today, and then we're doing it tomorrow too. That'll be interesting too, to see what pops up from there, how many asymptomatic people we have. But that would be my recommendation, that you want to say, hey, you're looking out for these things. And then if these things pop up, that's when we ask them to go get, one or two of these symptoms pop up. That's when we say, hey, you should probably go get tested.
And you tested nearly 600 today, and you're expecting about the same
The
amount
goal
tomorrow?
is 1,200 over these 2 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
And where is that being done at?
It's at the Armory here from 12 to 6 tomorrow. And if you do not have an online appointment, you can just come walk up and we'll be happy to register you.
And there's no charge for that, right?
No charge, no identification. You don't have to have symptoms.
And then for other people that are trying, I know for rapid testing is very limited. It's a limited number, and it's first come, first serve. I've known people that thought they were going to get rapid test and then got the normal and are still waiting for results.
Yeah, and that can be a cost, the rapid test. And we have not been necessarily encouraging people to do the rapid test, just because nothing's been 100% verified with that. There can be some false negatives out of that. And so we have not gotten any direction from the Department of Health to encourage people to take those. To only do the PCR test, which would be the nasal swab, saliva test.
And the saliva test actually is available through Steele County as well.
All Steele County residents.
All Steele County residents, whether you're symptomatic or not, you can get a saliva test. And what I've heard is that saliva test comes to you in about a day.
Mm-hmm.
You then go on to a video site. A health practitioner will observe you while you basically are putting saliva into a tube. They watch you close it up, you send it off, and you get your results somewhere between 24 and 48 hours later. That's the goal anyway?
Yes, yep. We're one of 23 counties across the state that is in this pilot project for the saliva testing.
And how do residents get a hold of those tests, those saliva test kits?
You go on the Department of Health website, you go to the testing section, and then there's an online form that you fill out to get it.
Oh, to get the test kit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In any communication we send out to parents, we're going to start adding that link to get tests if people are so inclined to do so.
Because a person could proactively request those kits and sort of have them in the medicine cabinet. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the shelf life is on them, but potentially yes.
I know our staff, as part of the Safe Learning Plan that was issued on July 30th, every staff member received a saliva test, a URL anyway that you can request it. One thing we're hearing from the Commissioner of Health is that we have to have those, if you want, as a staff member, those have to be ordered before December 30th. You don't have to use it before then, but you have to order it before December 30th because it was purchased with the coronavirus relief funding. So,
How many tests are normally done? Like your goal is 1,200 in these 2 days. How many would have you normally have expected if you didn't have a community event in these 2 days?
Mayo Health Systems, they did have their drive-through testing site behind the Mayo Clinic there. which has moved to the old Mayo Clinic, and now you have to get an appointment. I know before they moved it out there, it wasn't unusual for them there towards the end to have 200 to 250 tests a day. They've had to scale back on that a little bit because they're having people come indoors now due to the weather. But definitely that's increased over the last month or so.
Can I just clarify one more thing? And Jeff, you mentioned this, I just want to make sure I understood. You were talking, I think, total new cases, and you said there had been 35 per day in
Steele
past,
County.
and now we're up over 100 or 160.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll be a little more
clarify.
clear on that. So, and you can probably say it just as well as I can, Amy, if you want to talk about, they measure it by a 14-day incubation period, so it's the formula that you've seen before. So you take the number of residents in Steele County, number of cases reported over a 14-day period actually, and then.
Yeah, that's for the county rate.
Right.
I think you're referring to just pure raw numbers.
I think
So
total new
Oh,
cases
okay.
is what we were
total
talking
new
about. Yep.
cases over a week, we were looking at 30 to 35 new cases. That was at the end of September. When we got into October, we jumped up to 60 to 65 new cases. Within the last week, we're at 165 new
Really?
cases a week. So we've quadrupled in 2 weeks with new cases per week.
And that's Steele County.
Steele County, yeah.
Christina, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Amy, thank you.
Yeah,
You're
thank you,
welcome.
Amy, I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you for all your.
I'll, yeah, you can feel free to go, Amy. I'm gonna keep you here, Mark, so we can enter the next phase of this conversation. And actually, I know that Michelle Krell is listening too. I'm gonna have her come in and take Amy's spot actually for the next level of questioning that board members might have. But one of the pieces that we know whenever a school is considering distance learning has been activities. And what I can tell you is that I was in a meeting this morning with Eric Martins, the executive director for the Minnesota State High School, and asked him a question around the number of school districts that have chosen to go to distance learning and what are the activity rates there. So what schools have said no activities with distance learning and which schools are still choosing to commence. To date, I think out of the 60 to 75 schools that are our size or larger that have chosen to go distance learning, I think to my knowledge there are only 2 that are not participating in activities, which I think is important to remember because we know activities are an important part of kind of how we do our life in a school district. And that I've asked Mark to come here tonight to talk a little bit about what the fall has already looked like with activities and perhaps just a little bit of the strategy you've been using to help mitigate some of the other. Yeah, so I'll let you
Absolutely.
talk.
So thank you for inviting me here and letting me come and speak on activities because I guess I'd like to start out by just saying that, with our kids, this is about, the activities that our kids are involved with is about the only little piece of normalcy that they have going right now. Because school is not school as they know it. It's just not. At least our 6-12 kids, it's not. As much as we'd love it to be, they don't have that interaction. They don't have it. And when they got to play soccer this fall and their football right now and volleyball and they're getting excited for their winter activities, even though it's still different than what they're used to, it's not the same length, and there's, we don't have the stands, the filled like we usually do. It's still, they get to compete. They get to be, do those things. Our carolers still get to practice. They just talked with Mr. Harris and said, we want to sing. We want to sing. We want to be able to sing to our parents. If it's 2 per in the auditorium or the gym, we want to sing. It's what we love to do. We want to have this opportunity. So I guess that's my biggest thing is, while I understand and I totally agree that COVID is something that we have to watch really closely, and the health and safety of our kids is number one, but there's the social, emotional, and mental health of our kids as well. That is so important, and not having activities would be really, really hard on them. And so I just like to put that out there as we go. This fall, I'd like to tell you that we keep our kids in pods and groups. So, when we have volleyball practice, basketball practice this winter, everything we do, we have event protocols that we put together. we tell our kids which door they can come in, which door they have to leave. They can't use locker rooms. There's no showers. The kids have to have all of their own stuff, their own water bottles. So there's no sharing. For example, with basketball, they have to sit at their own chair, and when they, from B squad to JV, they have to sanitize all the chairs, sanitize the tables before they go. We allow 2 spectators per participant. So if you happen to, you wouldn't be able to get in there, but if you came in there and you looked in the gym, it looks like there's no one there. I mean, there's some parents are sitting in the stands, but they're able to watch. Our kids are in their groups. We've had cases this fall. We've had in football, volleyball, boys soccer, boys cross country, swim and dive. We've had positive cases in our sports, and there's no way that you're going to be able to keep it out as you hear the numbers. But what I'd like to add to that, which is so important, is we've had no spread on our teams. None. So we've had a positive case in football. In fact, it was in my group of linebackers. Me, my son, it was in our group. And we went through a long email conversation with MDH. They determined the one young man that was positive was quarantined. And they just said, just watch for symptoms, watch the other athletes. No other kids ever had symptoms. No other kids were positive. That young man's been back for all the time now and totally healthy, successful. We've had volleyball in 9th grade. We had a positive case. All the girls were quarantined because they were exposed. There were maybe 23 of them. None of them were positive. None of them had symptoms. They've all been back, and they've all been competing and doing well. So we've had cases. We've had kids that we've been exposed, and it's been really good because we've had kids reach out and say, Coach, my dad was tested and he was positive. I have to quarantine for 14 days. So they've been really good communicating, saying, correct, stay home. Our coaches are on top of it saying, yes, you need to stay home for 14 days, make sure you quarantine. And then we watch our attendance tracking at school to determine when those kids can come back. So we've had cases, and we're going to continue to. It was the message that I sent to our coaches this summer. It's not going to be a matter of if, it's when you have a positive case on your team, because we're in a pandemic. To say that we're not going to have any positive cases coming in is not realistic. What we have to do is make sure that we keep our kids safe and make sure that we don't have spread occurring. The only one that I know of where there was spread on a team was swim and dive, girls swim divers. And then as I investigated a little bit more with it, it ended up, I think, being 6 girls. 2 of them lived together, and they're the first ones that got it. And then they ended up being in a car together watching the football game. As I talked to Amy Jo on this. So it wasn't at diving where they were spreading it per se. It was traced back to where they were together in a car. So I think that's most important to know, is that we're not seeing spread in our activities. And when we have JV volleyball, we put the curtain down. So JV volleyball's here, varsity volleyball's in the middle. So we're doing this. The one big thing too is on bus. We've been having parents giving them the opportunity to do the travel release forms so they can transport their kids to and from events. We're still, I've talked to I've already had our winter head coaches meeting, and we've discussed this and talked about it. We're still going to give parents that option, because right now MDH is, if you have a positive case on a bus for cumulative 30 minutes, every person on that bus is quarantined. So we've been mitigating that with football, and we did a little bit at the end of soccer in sections when they changed the rule. So we've been having, I would say, over half of our football players have been driving with their parents to and from games to help alleviate that. But once we get into winter, I don't know. The discussion I've had with our coaches is we still can give that opportunity to our families if they want. But if you have a positive case on your varsity basketball team on the bus, then chances are likely they were infectious the day before at practice, and they're all probably going to get quarantined regardless, just because they're of exposure. So that's where we're at, and we're continuing to look at, I'm meeting with Evan Moe on Thursday to determine gymnastics. Chances are likely there'll be no parents in there. If so, it might be 4, 5 sitting in the bleachers. So we evaluate every facility, who can be in, who can't be in. If we do have parents come in for, say, so for instance, right now we have volleyball tomorrow night. B squad will come in and they'll play, but it's 2 spectators per. As soon as that game is done, we remove all the parents. They go out door 15, they come in 16, they go door 15, and those B squad kids leave. Then we let the JV parents come in, the JV teams come and they warm up. As soon as JV's done, they go, the next parents usher in. So we never have a big push of, folks at the same time. And it's been successful. We've been, we've had, we've gotten through soccer, we've gotten through cross country, and our kids have had really good success. I mean, they've created memories now with 2 Big 9 cross country titles and girls soccer going to a section finals. And I know that that's not, but just the memories, even though they're shortened seasons and kids expressing thank you. I've never gotten thank you letters from anybody ever, from students. They're not going to send a thank you to the AD. This is the first time ever. Just thank you for the opportunity and your work putting this together to let us do it. And I tell the coaches, listen, there's a lot of obstacles and a lot of things we have to overcome to provide a safe environment for our kids, but they're all willing to do it. They're all willing to put in that extra hard work to provide these opportunities for our kids, to keep them safe, but then to give them the opportunities to participate. So, I've talked to Jeff at length, I've talked to Corey at length, and obviously you guys can tell the tone of my conversation here. I would love to see our kids continue to be able to participate in activities. I would never want to put them in a position where they're not safe. I would never do that. Like I said, I expressed over and over and over to our winter head coaches and advisors, this is not an option. You have to follow these protocols. And at any point in time, if there's a family member, kids that don't feel safe, they do not have to participate. If they feel sick, if you're not there, you need to stay home, period. I've talked to Mr. Elstead about that week of the 30th. If we decided to stay with activities, we would screen those kids every day. I've talked to the coaches already, and I've already told them not about our ideas or talk of distance learning. I just said that week has already been determined as probably a super spreader with Thanksgiving and all the gathering that's going to occur. And I've told our coaches, I want you to be screening these kids every time they come to practice. No questions asked. You need to screen them. Over winter break as well, I want you screening them because we will have activities occurring at that time. So that is kind of where we're at right now. We've had a successful fall. I know numbers are getting a little precarious and winter is interesting. The other thing I would add is this. We can pivot really fast in activities. In other words, I just got an email today from New Richland saying, because we're supposed to have a C squad 9th grade football game tomorrow. Well, they can't because they have COVID. So I can talk. I've already called Coach Walters on the way over and said, make sure you email your families tonight. Let them know that the game tomorrow has been canceled. Got it. I already saw your email that you forwarded to me from Mr. Stork down at Nurhague. Got it. They'll get emails tonight. If we had a situation where we had kids that were exposed, we deemed exposed at noon, and we were supposed to have practice tonight, I can contact those coaches. We can contact the parents and say practice is canceled tonight. Really no different than if it was storming or bad weather and game's canceled tonight, we're moving it. We can pivot fast. We can communicate with families and say we need to stay home tonight. We have, our numbers went up or we had exposures and you need to stay home. It would never ask a parent that have to miss work or they have to come up with daycare. That's not happening with our activities because it's all after school in the evenings. So we would be able to move really fast within the day if we had situations that arose where we needed to make a quick decision. And we've been in that spot. We've had to make those decisions really fast. So that's where we're at right now.
One question I have, Mark, when you are practicing, you've mentioned me a couple of times about the efforts that coaches put into pod kids up so that they're in a similar group with one another. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what efforts have gone into that?
Yeah, because we've had where kids are designated in a certain pod and they stay with that group. We don't like them intermixing at all, and we purposely keep them there. Mm-hmm. It's not only just from that pod where that's who you practice and train with, but that's the equipment that you use is for that group only. Okay. And then obviously there's no sharing of any sort of water bottles, anything like that. We're not letting our kids use the drinking fountains. They can use bottle fillers, but none of those common touch points are allowed. We're not using weight room right now at all for anybody other than PE strength training classes. There's just too many touch points. So any conditioning strength work that we're doing it at site with our coaches, with those athletes in their pods. So there's no weight room use going on right now. It's just too difficult to try to keep that clean and sanitized.
Thank you.
Questions?
Of course, I have a few. So just a couple questions. So the junior high, are they participating in sports right now?
Yes, they are.
So from my recollection, I believe that some sports used to take the bus to other locations to practice. Have you had to increase bus use because of the number of kids exceeded the number available now because of social distancing on buses?
No, in fact, thinking that, going into it in the fall, we were worried about the number of kids distance learning and if we would have to run activity buses more in the community to pick kids up to get them to a site since there's distance learning. And the numbers are down where parents are actually getting them to where they need to be. We still run a shuttle bus from the middle school to the high school. So we do have kids that are on that bus. So that is a risk that, our families have to take where if there is a positive exposure on that shuttle bus, whoever's on that bus, and we know because we keep track, we keep attendance. So we have daily attendance, who is at practices, who are on these buses. We started out by having seating charts on the buses, so we knew because when they first started out, MDH said if you were within 6 feet sitting on the bus, then you're considered exposed. Well, then they changed it and said everyone on the bus for 30 minutes cumulative exposure. So now we just said, okay, well, but we still have kids that are going to be coming from the middle school, because typically our shuttle bus would go from the middle school, would drop off at OEC if we had some dancers. Dance team right now is being limited to 25 only. So the state high school put limits on the number of dancers for a dance team. And then if we did have any junior high, and I think I talked to Adam, there might be 4 kids total. Maybe it might just be 2 boys that need to come over. And then really that's about it. If we had any middle school hockey players, girls that would have to go, or gymnasts that have to be dropped off at the gymnastics club or the rink, but I don't know if we're going to have any 8th grade girls playing hockey. We might have some, well, they'll play, but I don't know if they're going to be at the varsity JV because our numbers are really good. We're going to have a 15 JV and a varsity, which is great. I don't know who we're going to get to play, but because the other numbers in southern Minnesota aren't great, but so we still do offer shuttle. It's just we don't have a ton of kids riding it right now. So. And
do you have any games or practices tentatively scheduled for the week after Thanksgiving?
Yes. So right now we would have, and that's we'd have 2 section, and that's the big one is section volleyball start that week. So our girls would start their first round on Tuesday, second round would be on that Friday. We'd have a varsity boys hockey game, JV and varsity. We'd have a varsity and all levels boys basketball. We'd also have varsity JV dance meet. And then the other thing that's really important, I think, I talked to Mr. Elstead about is that week our boys swim and dive, our wrestling, our girls hockey all start that week. So if we did not allow them to go, they would have to then start the next week, which is then everything is running full tilt. So we would be looking at double-digit events that we'd have to try to look at rescheduling and moving somewhere. And the way that it's got set up right now is we can only go 2 events per week until we get to the last 2 weeks, and then the state high school lets us go 3 a week. But the only way you can go 3 is if you have to reschedule due to COVID or weather. So if we move those, we would have to move them to the back end because right now, for example, Josh had asked me about basketball. Geez, I'm worried about playing on the 4th. If our football team does well, we're not going to have those kids back. And, is there a way that we can move it later? And I talked to Josh about it, and I said, Josh, I looked through the whole schedule. I would not be able to reschedule until February, end of February, because we're 2 the whole way. And unfortunately, that's why, we do have games over Christmas break or winter break, which I was against. And I kind of expressed to state high school, I wish they would have just blocked that out for us, but they didn't, just because they scrunched the schedule. So it would be, if we pushed it, we would have a lot of trickle down where we'd have to be rescheduling quite a few events, and it would then fall into those end weeks where we're already going to be limited, because I do believe that we'll have reschedules happening. Whether it's weather or COVID related, it really doesn't matter. We did with volleyball, Faribault West had to reschedule volleyball, varsity volleyball, so it pushed everything into that back week. So with 9th grade volleyball, we lost 4 games because we were positive and we had to quarantine our girls. I've only been able to reschedule 2. because the other dates they've already been playing 3 and I don't have any dates left because it's not just our dates that we have. The other teams are plugging them up too because they're trying to reschedule. So it becomes kind of an iffy situation. Yeah.
One final one. So do you foresee, how do I say this? So with distance learning potential and practices, would each student have to get to the practices themselves, or would you have like a place that you could have, kind of like they had with lunches, where you have a central spot where people could meet to get the bus to go to practice, or what are you envisioning?
We would have, and that's where we had looked at it in the fall, wondering on those days of distance learning, how would that work? And, this fall we had that situation too on the days that were distance learning, and our kids were all able to get there. Okay. So we would not look at sending an activity bus around to pick kids up. Our kids even our lower level have been at practices and they get to all the sites that they need to go. So that's a great question because that is a concern, and that was a concern I had. But I talked with Mr. Elstead about it and then talked to Kira at the bus company saying, okay, how, these days, there's going to be 3 days where we're going to have kids that are going to be distance learning. It could be group 1 or group 2, and every day Wednesday. So then we reached out in the fall, and it really was, and we try to express to our all of our coaches to say, when you talk to them, advisors, our country kids, we can't send the bus out in the middle of the country to pick up 1 kid. And I think we had 5 that said, yeah, boy, would you like to get picked up? And then we looked at the addresses, and they could have walked to the high school. Literally, they were a block away or 2 blocks away. So we just said, Kira, don't worry about it. Our folks can get to the school, So but that's a great question on that.
I think we would stand at the ready, though, and identify if we had students where transportation was a barrier. I think we would certainly make that available. It's just that the fall didn't work out that way. Perhaps winter changing and the seasons changing would change that dynamic, but at this point, I think we would stand at the ready to provide it if need be.
And I think, I think it's important too, in the fall, Kira and the bus company were totally ready to provide those opportunities and have buses ready for us if we needed them. So I think if we found out that we did need kids getting transportation, they would be okay to make that work. So.
Thank you for all your organization.
Thank you. Again, thank you for providing the opportunities and giving us a chance to work with our kids and coach them. And even though tonight was really cold, so I told take a hot shower and get home because it was freezing cold out there tonight. So, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade it. So,
thank you so much for your passion. I know these kids and their activities are in good hands with you, but I do have some more questions that I just want to explore a little bit. So I appreciated where you were going with sort of the numbers. Can you just step back and give us a sense of how many activities? So again, we're talking about 1 week of activities here, right? We're just talking about the week after Thanksgiving, correct? I mean, that's the scope of our discussion tonight?
Yes, it's a scope of our discussion. I would add, though, that should we have to toggle to distance learning sooner, it might be longer, obviously, that we would be considering it. But what was in the purview of our discussion tonight was that targeted distance learning week at the end of November.
Okay,
right?
just wanted to clarify how, sort of what we're talking about here. Yep. So help me, can you just step back and talk about how many activities are really in play?
Yep.
And not just sports. I'm assuming we're talking activities and sports, so help us understand the scope. And then can you talk about how many kids, whether, the middle school or high school, are actually engaged in those? Do you have those kinds of metrics or?
Yep. So the week of November 30th, we would have potentially 2 section volleyball games, and that would just be varsity only. So you're talking, 15 to 20 girls. We have varsity and JV boys hockey. They would have a game. So you're talking 40 boys there.
I'm sorry, can I just clarify? So I appreciate these are competitions, but I'm assuming if activities are happening,
then
practices are happening.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about, okay.
Yeah, so those will be practices that whole week as well. Yep, so I'm just talking just like the event. So we would also have.
I'm sorry, and I interrupted you. So hockey, you said how many might be?
So 40 boys there. Boys basketball will be up and running. So you'd have varsity, JV, B squad, 9A, 9B. So you're looking at probably 50 boys there. You'd have varsity and JV dance. And that's gonna be, but we'll also probably have a B, so you'd have 25, 50, you know, you have anywhere from 60 girls there. We are currently running mock trial, so that would go on hold. Our carolers are
But
practicing.
I'm sorry, how many would be
I
involved
don't
in?
know exactly how many
trial?
Ann has in mock trial. I would guess anywhere from 15 to 20 students. Carolers, Chris is currently up and running and they're practicing and he's looking to do a performance the week of December 7th, so it'll be that following week. He wants to do something early that week. He's targeting December 7th.
That's what, 25? I don't know what they are.
Yeah, about that.
30 maybe.
Yep, and it depends. I don't know. I'd have to look at registration numbers because we could be down a little bit depending on, you know, how many kids wanted to participate. You know, and then that same week, those were kind of the teams that were, because everybody I just mentioned right now would be currently, they would have already started practice on the week of the 23rd, and they would be going into competitions. That would also include 7th grade and 8th grade middle school basketball. Yes, that's the only middle school that's going that week. That would also include boys swim and dive because they would start tryouts and practice that week, and you're going to have anywhere from 30 to 35 boys in swim and dive. That'll include boys wrestling. They're going to have anywhere from, I talked to Adam, 30 to 35 in wrestling. You'll have girls hockey, where we're going to have 30 to 35 in girls hockey starting that week as well. So we're talking, the only sports that will not have started, because they're going to start on December 7th, are girls basketball and gymnastics. Otherwise, all of our winter activities will be up and running that week. Just trying to think. I did talk with Chris. I couldn't find Sandra and Pete. They were in class, but because I just said, what is our plan for our winter concerts? And right now, they're not planning them. They're not sure if they're going to have the winter concerts or not.
But those are curricular.
Correct.
They're not really co-curricular. They're
Correct.
not
Correct. So the only co-curricular is carolers.
carolers.
Yep. And then the mock trial, speech wouldn't start until later. Robotics is going to start later, even though they had a few kids. We've had them come in and work on their clean up their room and get things kind of organized. But they're kind of first robotics isn't sure what they're going to do right now. If they're going to do virtual, if they're going to run it. There's just a lot of things that are up in the air right now. Knowledgeable, we're still waiting to get some direction on what that's going to be. Because some of these things aren't state high school league sanctioned. They're more just different organizations, and they're kind of sitting on hold, not really sure what they're going to do.
Well, I imagine some of these activities are more can more easily be distanced. So if we talk about, what does a distanced activity look like? There might be some activities that, could be done that way. I will be frank, some of my concern when I've heard the descriptions of what does distancing look like in the wrestling program, for example, it doesn't strike me as distanced.
So,
and I know there's a big,
yep.
I appreciate that there's a huge, interest in having kids participate. But I'm really concerned that, are our activities any safer? I mean, are our kids safer in activities than they are in our school buildings?
The only thing that, how I'd speak to that is, so like for wrestling, for example, because I get a lot of people like, how can we even possibly wrestle? I mean, what? So the way that Adam set up and then we worked on it is he would have two separate practices. So you have your weight classes of your wrestlers. So say our was it 110, 103s. So our 103s would stay together in a group and they would wrestle in their group with those 4 kids identified, and they are going to be 12 feet away from the other kids. And then you have your next weight classes doing the same thing, and you have 2 separate practices. So those kids have to stay in their pods, have to stay in their groups. If there's any large demonstration or talking going on, those kids stay in that ring, stay in their circle, and then they listen to the coach in the middle of the room. They don't ever interact with the other weight classes, ever. So then when that practice is done, the whole room is sanitized, those kids leave, and then the next set of weight classes come in and they have to stay in their group. So the 103s, if you did have a positive case in there, those kids would be exposed. No different than if we, in our schools right now. I
Well,
think,
it is different though. I mean, I think it is different. And I mean, if you have a pod of 103s, right, and there are 4 of them, they're not masking in their pod,
when they're
right?
wrestling, no. When they're competing, no. Correct.
But our kids in school are masking, right? I mean, they're all masking. The whole staff is masking. The whole building is masking. We're distancing as best we can. So it's not the same. I don't think.
Yep. I guess, I look at it as, I've seen where kids are masking and they're in school and they're not necessarily within 6 feet, and it doesn't matter if they have a mask or not. They're still being considered exposed and they're out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But again, I'm not so much worried about the legalities and whether they're considered
you're
a
worried
close
about if
contact.
they don't
I'm
have a
really
mask.
talking about, are kids going to, I know you suggested there's no spread going on in activities. I don't need to debate that. I'm not sure. I've heard stories that might suggest otherwise, I guess is all I'm saying. So I am concerned that are we putting our kids in a position where, we say to them, we want you safe, so we're going to keep you home from the classroom, but somehow these activities are more important than your safety, so we want you to go do those.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just me, or is there an inconsistent message there? Or
Well, I think one of the things too, I think that's different is when I have my own 2 children.
Yep.
That I'm sending them to activities and they're participating.
Yep.
But I know when I send Molly to go play hockey, she's with those 20 girls. She's with those 15 girls, and that's it. And then she's home from those 15 girls. When she goes to the high school right now, she goes from her math class to her English class to her civics class, and she's sitting with a different bunch of kids, and then she's in the lunchroom too. So there's 400 kids there versus 15 or 20. So we've had families that elected to distance learn this whole year, and then they called and said, can we still participate in activities? And I said, yes, absolutely. And I talked to them, why are you not? Well, I'd rather have my son or daughter come participate with those 30 kids or those 20 kids versus have them go to school with 400. I feel like it's safer to be with those 30 than it is the entire school. And that was the choice that they were making. We said, absolutely, you can still participate. You're enrolled in our schools, and you certainly can. So I think that
well, it's one example. I mean, I appreciate people have different opinions on this one.
I think it's a dilemma because there's no good solution for any of this. When I was speaking with Eric Martins, who's the executive director for the State High School League today, we talked a little bit about, activities are more structured environment than many teenagers have when they're outside of school, because that's the one thing we can't control is what happens outside of school. One of the other things that we saw last spring was when we were in a long distance learning period and we did not have activities happening, we saw students becoming less engaged with school altogether, and I can't, say what they were participating in outside of that, but that was one of his major items that were as a proponent of keeping activities is the structure that it still does provide student athletes. And furthermore, when students are participating, they're continued to be asked to provide positive momentum towards graduation, keeping grades up and things like that. There are arguments on both sides of this item, and I don't know that either side of this has the total right answer. The one thing, as we considered, and I mentioned before, to use this scalpel approach, where you're trying to identify where is there an issue, and then you deal with that issue. I would just furthermore say that Mr. Martins indicated that if there's an issue on a team, that is immediately dealt with, and the kids have 14 days. That's the way this goes. And so it is dealt with. Like I said, I don't have data that says, well, yes, this is the direction we should go. What I do have is anecdotal data from students and families indicating that activities are still an important part of their life and their kids, and they're fine they'd love to have their kids all in person at the school. And I would say that that's probably the predominant sort of message I get from parents. But in lieu of that, if there's something they can still keep, activities are the important part. And so the reason why we brought this too is that there's going to be lots of question marks on either end of a decision that's made. And I think what I'd like the board to consider and having just a different, because it would be pretty easy to say, well, let's just not have activities, but there are impacts to that. And so thinking through all of those things, if and when we have to go to distance learning, this will be a question that the board will be faced with. And what I'd share with you is, you probably followed what happened with the Anoka-Hennepin School Board. They went to distance learning, they chose not to do activities, and then about 3 days later, the activities were reinstated. And that's happened about 3 or 4 times in the state where activities were reinstated.
Can you say more about the why behind this? The why were they reinstated?
I think there was lots of pressure put on the school board by the Let Them Play sort of coalition that was built with parents to have kids continue to be part of activities. And as a superintendent, I would tell you that there are a lot of things that end themselves up on the student superintendent's desk, but activities is typically one of them. Not because of any mismanagement by Mr. Ochterkirk, because he certainly has done a wonderful job of that, but there's so much emotion around activities, particularly when we talk about our seniors that look at last experiences. I have a daughter that never got to be a senior captain on the track team last spring. And that was one of her greatest things that brought anguish to her about not being able to participate. And so we know more about COVID now than we did in March or April of last year. But it would be something that I would add is the board needs to would consider both ends of this before we made a decision. And perhaps there are reasonable compromises within that. I don't know. But it would be something.
And I'd just add in there too that, when they're with us, when we're coaching them, working them, our kids are social distancing, they're wearing masks. They're listening to us coaches. I just on a personal, I asked Grand Molly, do you want to continue with hybrid? I mean, do you want to distance learn? Do you feel safe in school? And they just said, we love being with our teachers. We love being in our sports. We need to be around those folks. So when they're, we talk to our kids, our football players, for example, because I'm a coach on the team. We talk to our kids about make sure you're making, if you want to continue to participate, make sure you're making good decisions when you leave here. Make sure you're making good decisions when you go out and about with your friends. If they don't have that, I'm really worried that they're going to say, it doesn't matter. I mean, because right now we're battling that anyhow with some folks that are saying, which we know it absolutely matters. And I just want to, keep those positive role models in front of our kids saying, make good decisions. This is important to wear your mask, to social distance, to be really smart about the decisions that you're making. And I'd hate for us to lose that opportunity to keep really good people in front of our kids.
Some other questions?
I have one additional one. So it's more directed at Mr. Elstead. So the original premise of the week after Thanksgiving is that we won't start seeing cases or symptoms till Wednesday, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I worry that that's 300 kids that are potentially have COVID, who are now exposing multiple people. I mean, is there a thought in a compromise that maybe the first Monday, Tuesday at least? I mean, again, I know this isn't, but up for discussion, I guess, is kind of what I don't know if that's kind of where you were going, Lori, but that's kind of where my head was going, that it just feels contradictory that we're saying that, there's no, we're not going to see symptoms until later in the week, but yet it's okay to have kids with potential getting it to start practice on Monday.
Absolutely, and I think that's a reasonable thought to have. I think it's something that is, this world that we live in is a consistent contradiction because we're striving so much for normalcy and that we try to find every little glimmer of normalcy that we can have, and that's why, like I say, it seems like every day is a contradiction. Right. There's potential that could be considered. It would have to work out, and again, I haven't, explored that option with Mr. Ochterkirk, but potentially, you'd basically lose 2 days on the front end of that week. But then you could suspend practices Monday and Tuesday, and then come at it again on Wednesday. I don't know how that plays out. I don't know the impact of that, but it's something to consider. If we feel, I mean, I told you before, and that's the science of it, is indicating that 3 to 5 days after the exposure is typically when symptoms show up. There's a better chance that if we were to wait till Wednesday, we would have seen some symptoms show up.
Right.
Which still means that if you have, student athletes that are participating in activities, because to my knowledge, the only thing I would take exception with is Tuesday, December 1st is a section volleyball game where you would actually be asking the volleyball team to step aside from section play, where they've been working all season toward that. And the reason is because we had delayed seasons.
Right.
Now you have a lot of different ideas you could do. You could keep volleyball going for that, Monday, Tuesday, and then you could suspend other winter activities until Wednesday if that was something the board wanted to look at too. I think that's an option perhaps we could explore to see if that's, because at least I think it keeps the integrity of some of that together, but yet it is taking into play the potential for that whole science around symptomatic behavior.
Right. And in reading the Anoka article, didn't Anoka originally decide to suspend activities because that was the recommendation originally by, that if you have
Right.
distance learning to not have activities? And I
Yeah.
believe that the article kind of
Right.
made reference to that.
The Department of Education reversed their decision. They first said if you go to distance learning, you have to suspend activities. And then it was about 48 hours later that the Department of Education reversed their decision, which then gave the Anoka Hennepin School Board and other boards the opportunity then to bring activities back into play.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Jeff and Mark, I have a question. So parents reporting, kids reporting either positive rates, are you finding that they're pretty consistent and honest with this is when symptoms started, this is when we know it, this is who's impacted, here's some line tracing? Or are they kind of, well, we kind of think it's here, maybe it's here. So I'm thinking about that week after Thanksgiving, if there's been a consistent honesty, authenticity with parents because they value their kids participating, that they're this spring and this, spring, fall, they've been saying, kids positive, here's who they were with on this team, you might want to reach out. Or we've already reached out to those parents and players ourselves.
Well, it's the positives we've been, we get notified because of, if they're positive, then they start contact tracing. But it's the kids that have been exposed that, we maybe wouldn't know, but we've been finding that they've been very good about it.
Okay.
And contacting the head coaches and saying, we just had a couple that just came up in football that are top players for us saying, my dad tested positive or my mom tested positive, I've been exposed, them out for 14 days.
Okay.
Which very easily could have told us nothing.
Right. Yeah.
And they could have played knowing that we play Wednesday and then we start rolling in the playoffs next week. I mean, this is a, top kid. And it's like, well, we appreciate, thank you. Because I think kids and parents are starting to realize that if you're not open and you're not honest, and you don't communicate, and it does come out, you stand the risk of taking the whole team down.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're not just saying, I've been exposed, I need to stay away.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's another piece that's worth mentioning is that I think our students are more apt to be reporting it when they know that there will be something there later. If they're not having that opportunity, I don't know where that would go. We haven't had that yet, but I think it also adds that students are being responsible. Kids are really good about saying, look, this is the situation I'm in. And they understand what those repercussions will be because they care about their coaches and they care about their teammates to a point where they'll say, I'm taking myself out of this so I don't put any of you at risk, which I think is another leadership component we teach our kids. And we want that behavior to be happening where they're self-advocating for their own sort of behavior.
I would say, just to add on that, I'm sorry.
No, I was actually going to ask our high school person
Yeah.
in the room, maybe if you had any perspectives or thoughts about what do you think your peers are saying or doing about this topic? Do you think they're honest when they're sick? Do you think they care much about their activities? What are your
No,
your
yeah.
thoughts?
So for JV, there was one of the girls who her dad tested positive, and she was very like clear about it,
Yeah.
talking about how got tested. She got tested for COVID, and she turned out negative the first time, but of course her whole family was tested, and they were positive as well. But she was still quarantined with them, like even though she wasn't positive. But then she tested again, and she was just keeping us up, like with the small updates, and she was very clear about it, talking about how this is the day that I got sick and this is the day that I can come back. And I just feel like she's been very like clear about it the whole time. But yeah.
Danielle, how are students feeling about activities? I mean, you had a perspective, you were a volleyball player this fall, or still are a volleyball player this fall, so.
No, we've definitely there's been like a few talk like, oh, play your hardest, this might be our last game, play your hardest. Like, there is a little bit like, we are afraid that our sports will get canceled, but at the same time, if it's because of our safety, we would rather put our safety first before sports. I feel like that's my personal opinion at the same time. But
Christina, any questions?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, thanks. I feel like we need to kind of round the bend on this topic, but my observation for you, Mark, would be that a routine visit to the clinic involves a temperature scan and 6 routine questions that are asked, and all of which takes less than 20 seconds.
Yep.
And I can, based upon the questions that you're hearing from the board tonight, you had talked about screening being an integral component of deeper and deeper into these seasons that we go. And I would be a strong advocate that you would have much greater support, I think, at the board level for activities continuing to take place if there was a ritualistic, systematic, every single kid, every single practice, or every single event where a 15 or a 20-second routine that happens the exact same way when you walk into the clinic, that the community would feel better, we'd feel better. Across the board, I think we're doing more than just saying we're watching for it. If we ask those questions and we take the kids' temp, I think you have much better buy-in.
Plus you had a track record that way to trace back, you watch their temperatures if they're holding steady at a certain, because we do it at work too.
Yep.
It's the first red flag, is if they're normally at this level and they're starting to go up a little.
I will just tell you, anecdotally, I've heard temperature checks are not particularly effective, so for whatever that's worth. I'm curious, actually, Michelle's at the table and we haven't heard. I don't know, do you have any comments on this topic, or? I'm curious that you're at the table, but we haven't really heard from you, so that's why I just.
I believe activities are extremely important, and of course our health and safety of our students is extremely important. I agree that you could go on both sides of this, and so I don't know that I have a definite opinion either way, because I see the benefits of both of them, and I see that, I think about the girls that have section volleyball coming up, and that those are things that weigh heavy on our hearts, because we know how important the activities of our students are, but we also know how important their health and safety is. So, I appreciate the fact that our activities have had such strong, they've done a great job of really working with our students, keeping them in pods, making sure that we're watching very carefully. Our students have been very honest. I think I feel like our students really want to play. And they don't want to be the person that knocks their team out. Mm-hmm. They are very conscious of that. So I think that there's a lot to weigh in here as a board, because I know that this is not an easy decision. But I do know that there's a lot of hard work going in both ends.
I would add just one final comment. As Mr. Sebring indicated, we probably need to round the bend. So if we're talking about, how activities play, because this is obviously a very, this is a dilemma. There's not a good solution to this, so this is a true dilemma. I think one thing to keep in mind is that we do have districts in the Big 9 Conference, Rochester being one of them, with 3 high schools that has been in distance learning since the beginning of the school year, and they've still continued with all of their activities. Likewise, the other districts in Steele County that have agreed to try this sort of targeted distance learning week have all indicated that they have every intention of continuing activities in those schools. So just know, and again, that's why at the very front end of this, I reported that the State High School League is reporting that There's just a very, very small number of high schools that have chosen to not do activities, but it may not be in fact because they've chosen distance learning. They may in fact have outbreaks that are necessary to do so. So the last thing I would leave on this topic with activities and all of these things together is that Friday morning, we have a special meeting with a few other agenda items. This would be one I'd like the board to consider and give the next few days in thought and consideration about moving forward with this so that we then could specifically communicate with parents what that week would look like, with the caveat that we are in a time when things can change at a day's notice or even an evening's notice. And so we remain vigilant about watching numbers and making sure that we're doing our work and that we could toggle to distance learning at any moment. However, we also are trying to be somewhat proactive here, recognizing the science behind a major holiday and the gatherings that will happen. So those are my last comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Jeff,
I'm sorry.
you have,
Do you need me for anything else?
I don't think
Just
so.
some
Anybody
things?
other
Okay.
questions of Michelle? Two things before Mr. Oxkirk walks out the door. Sorry, Mark. Hang on, Michelle. A big thank you, Mark, for all you've done. You've stood on your head all fall long and summer long to make these things happen. And it's because you care about our kids and you have this passion inside of you that just wants opportunities for kids, and we saw that again tonight, so thank you. Yep. And
Thanks.
this distance learning doesn't just happen overnight. It happens because you have people like Michelle Krell that continue to kind of put programs and things together to make it work for our buildings. And along with assigning substitutes, and her staff are out in buildings with classrooms, and so big thank you to Michelle for all the work that's gone into this, because they work hard. We have great people in this district, so thank you.
Thank you both. Yep.
Thank you.
yeah, you have Deb McDermott Johnson out in the hallway as well. Did you want to address the childcare?
I would be happy to, and I just wanted to add, because I know we went a little long. I knew activities was going to take. Deb, if you wouldn't mind coming in, please. Thank you. Yeah, please. One of the things that we didn't mention about this is that the services during this targeted distance learning time, in addition to actually our toggle to distance learning with McKinley, includes our full services. So within that, Deb and her staff have already been working on a plan to provide care for families that are in need for our McKinley families, but certainly during this targeted learning time, distance learning time in late November, early December, Deb and her staff stand ready to provide that child care. So I had kind of people lined up tonight if there would be questions. The other thing, of course, is student nutrition. Amanda's here, could answer any questions you might have about student nutrition. And I apologize for kind of having discussions, that activities discussion I knew would take a longer time. But any questions for Deb in regard to child care that we would be providing for families in need?
I was just thinking back to the distance learning model from the spring, but we would have to, it would be like a regular kind of cost model for that, right? For what we'd be offering.
Yes,
now.
the governor, his current order does provide for what they call critical worker tier 1, and what the criteria for that is, and then all others would have a cost model. And so what we're also trying to do is we are talking to families, because even those who are qualifying for the cost model, for some families it is creating a question mark in their family budget. So we're trying to, so by noon tomorrow we'll know who's in, who's sitting on the fence, and who just needs some help to make sure their kids are cared for. So we'll start pulling all that together after we give families a chance to kind of read the letter and figure out what that means for their family. So the phone rang off the hook for the first 2 hours, then it got kind of quiet. Because people are thinking. So we know tomorrow morning it will be wild and woolly again.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Super.
And Deb, it does seem like one of the obvious questions would be, do you have the staff to be able to accommodate extra children for care?
That is a challenge, I will be honest, because we lost another one to a 14-day quarantine today. So all I can say is we're working on it, and we're going to do our best. I'll be honest with you, our use of childcare this year has been extremely light. On non-school days where we have traditionally served 65 to 80 kids, we're serving 18. Families are making other arrangements. And even our after-school sites, our waiting lists have dropped, partly because I think of the high school and their model. For 3 days a week, families have got older siblings. And then for whatever the other arrangement is for the other 2 days, I'm not always sure. But families are getting pretty creative on how they're managing that. So I think we're going to be able to meet the need, and we'll know by 4 o'clock tomorrow what our scenario really looks like.
Thank you. And thanks also for the heavy load you're carrying with all this.
Well, I have an amazing team that carries most of the water. I'm the mop-up queen.
When you make these decisions and you have people you can just look across the table, and Deb will already say, I'm already working on it, Jeff. We've got the plan ready to go. We just need to put it in place. So
It's good stuff. We'll be good.
Good. Thank you.
thanks, Deb.
Perfect. Thank you.
And did you want Amanda to say
I don't know
anything?
that it's necessary that Amanda's here. If you had questions about student nutrition, we would continue to offer meals like we've done. They'll be bundled. All of that information went out today. Come on in, Amanda. Sorry. I've got a great team that stands at the ready. Amanda's been working with Sarah Brooks in student nutrition to create a system where we would bundle meals again, because obviously we want to make sure that our kids are fed during this distance learning time at McKinley, but also in preparation for our further discussion around a targeted distance learning time as well. So Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, for the distance learning period at McKinley, right now we had communication that went out as far as meal bundles picking up, so we'll have Tuesday and Thursday pickup. This week and next week, during Thanksgiving week, we'll have a Tuesday pickup, and then the following week, we're actually switching to do Monday, Wednesday pickup, since we have that long break with Thanksgiving there. So that communication went out today. And then further expanding that, if we end up going distance learning completely district-wide, we would actually be serving at all of our school sites except for OEC and Washington, just because of the close proximity from Washington to the middle school, and then also from the OEC to the high school. So we would just have those families pick up at the high school or middle school. So we'll have meals available at all sites and ready to go, and Sarah and her team are excellent with getting everything prepared and have worked really hard.
So are families able to pick up for other families who may be in quarantine, who are not able to leave to go pick up their meals?
Yeah, so at this time, the waivers are there where we don't have to have a student or whatever to check off the list. So we're following the summer school food service program that we were able to follow last fall. So yes, that would be something that could happen if we had someone in quarantine. Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, that was a change. USDA last year for a short time wouldn't allow unless you were in person. Right. And we were already starting to kind of hand them out because we're like, this doesn't make sense. But then they released that and gave us some waivers to do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was a little bit tricky there for a while. But yes,
it was
very, very nice for them to relax that, because it's definitely, we want to feed as many kids as we can. So
yeah, and we still have free meals, ages 1 to 18, or through 18, I guess it is.
Yep, and it'll be through June 30th, so through the rest of the school year. So
really?
yep.
So that's been extended.
Yep.
That's good to know. Amanda, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
Amanda.
Want to tie a bow on this one?
No, there's a lot going on, right? And I know there's emotion with it. There certainly is, hard work that's gone in. I can't say enough about the team of people I get to work with every day that they're so competent at knowing what they're doing. They answer questions before I even ask them. They're just really putting together a great plan. And again, I appreciate the proactivity we've tried to create to try to get away from this constant reaction. I'm enthused, and I'm also looking at, as we move forward, there's some hope for us. Some news came out today about vaccine and however we believe about that. But those are the things, those kind of glimmers of light that we're all looking for. I think we see a future where there could be more testing provided for staff and students that would allow us to be in person more often. So again, we're putting these pieces in place. We hope they're short term. We don't want to do another 9 or 10 week distance learning time. We just don't want to do that. So what we're trying to do is find ways to mitigate that so we don't have to get there. That's the real benefit here, is that if we can do these things right in a timely way, they allow us to make sure that we can get beyond this sort of peak, bring our kids back in person where we still do our best work together. So that's it. Thank you for your time. I know this was a long topic tonight, but there's just a lot going on, and I think the board to be fully informed about where we're moving forward and where we've been. So thank you for the time tonight.
We're going to move on. Can you see Paul and Sal out in the hallway? Want to catch your breath for a sec? Do you need more water?
No, if you're a Monty Python fan, this is now for something completely different. We've been waiting a long time for this. Come on in. We've been waiting for this presentation, and as you remember, it's been a year since we successfully passed a bond referendum for a new high school. It's been a year that, Bob and Paul and Sal and folks from Krause Anderson that have been helping us with this have really been working hard with different groups, identifying what this new high school would be, where it started, and where it's at. So I'm not going to say anything more because these guys are the showstoppers tonight. So Sal and Paul, thanks for being here, and
good evening.
Lead us off.
Well, thanks for having us. We're very excited to share this with you. There's been a lot of time and effort put in, so we'll talk a little bit about process, but mostly get to share a lot of details of the design with you tonight. So I'll just start a little bit with process. So right after the referendum passed, we worked with the administration to put together a core planning group who really met about every 2 weeks to set the mission and philosophy of the project. So I think we got one meeting in before winter break last year, and then it was about every 2 weeks for the next several months. And I think on the next slide, I have the list of core planning group members. I won't read all of their names, but they all put a lot of time and effort into coming up with the vision for the new high school, including going on some fun tours of other similar projects around the state to get ideas. Uh-oh.
Does this one work?
My arrow. Sure. Thanks, Sarah. I wonder if I can scroll. Switch keyboards.
I think you may need to restart the presentation. Welcome to 2020.
Wouldn't be, yeah, I was just going to say. Just when I was getting going.
Well, I can tell while you try to sort that out.
Yeah.
So we work with the core planning group to really synthesize ideas. So as we've talked about before, after the referendum, we really start with a clean sheet of paper. And build the whole design it from scratch. Of course, there's all the promises that were made to the voters, and the budget is set around a certain scope of work. So we're always careful to make sure we're building towards the things that were promised as part of the referendum, but it really is a design synthesized by the users. And over the next several slides, you'll see one of the ways that we do that is we don't start out with drawings, we start out with ideas and spend a long time. So we do those tours with people that really helps people see what schools can look like and some of the different ideas that people have. Because it's really hard, I think, for a lot of people to step out of their daily lives and the things that they've always known. And that's usually a very healthy process. Then we break that down into words or narratives, basically statements about the design that are abstracted from any solution. And by putting all of those things together and starting with a clean sheet of paper, then we come up with something that is new and customized, and hopefully in the end fits, exactly the set of sort of goals and topics that that group worked on us with.
From a non-architect voice, I can say from going from the very beginning with a clean sheet of paper to where we are today is amazing. And the process that Wold puts us through to get to the level that we're at was stressful for some people and some of the names you see up there and for some of the user groups. But in the end, I think what you're going to end up seeing today, you're just going to be wowed and amazed at how do we get from a blank sheet of paper to where we currently sit. It's pretty neat.
So in addition to the core planning group, so they really had oversight over the entire building. We did work with a couple subcommittees for some very specialized spaces. So the Performing Arts and Music Subcommittee, I have their member names listed here. They started a couple weeks after the main core planning group, but again met on an about every other week schedule, including going on tours. And then last but not least, the Physical Education Athletics Subcommittee, because obviously there are a lot of decisions to be made on both of those topics. So as Paul was talking about while I was doing some tech help with Sarah, we work a lot with them on writing these commitments and criteria. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I was going to hit some highlights. We did try to put in blue kind of the key words or ideas. Putting student first is a priority of the design. Wanting the design to be welcoming and inclusive while being safe. Being efficient, enduring, and demonstrate fiscal responsibility of the community. Wanting a vibrant learning environment that's innovating, inspiring, and exciting, and be a source of pride for Owatonna. Just a couple more of those. Lots of discussion about opportunities for all and flexible spaces. The core planning group and the subcommittees were very cognizant of how the community uses the high school and always had that in the forefront of their mind. As well as thinking about things like access to technology and natural light, which is natural given the building that they occupy today. So then some of the design criteria, that the building organization needed to be intuitive and foster a sense of community. Learning should be on display. You'll see that featured prominently throughout the design that we are sharing with you today. And that really the common space of being the heart of the school wanted to create a sense of community. Just a couple more. We'll speak a little bit more about it later with some graphics, but they, after much debate, decided that learning spaces will be located in an arrangement that they called a learning community to try to break down the size of the school. And then there was some nuance there about how science should be spread throughout the building, so being near each other but also have a presence in each learning community, and how important it was to them that special education spaces were distributed throughout the building. Last but not least, we spent a lot of time talking about how to make sure the building can be secured for the many evening and weekend events that you have at a high school. So we just grabbed all of the blue statements from those to try to summarize. These were really the bulk of our conversation with the core planning group. And we use them every time we're making design decisions back in the office. So then the subcommittees had their own criteria. So for the FIAD and athletics subcommittee, daylight was important to them as well. And they had a strong desire to have a visibility between the weights and fitness area and the walking track, the gym, and most importantly, the stadium. They saw that on some of their tours and really wanted that visual connectivity. And they had some creative ideas about how to have things like the training room, bathrooms, concessions, and locker rooms be co-located, but so that it could be shared between the building and the stadium. So that helped drive where in the floor plan they landed. Talked about how many bleachers we want to be able to hold and how we want spectators to load the bleachers from the walking track level so that athletes stay on the game court level. And to just also always be thinking multi-use and flexible for activities now and in the future. Spent plenty of time talking about storage. Obviously with activities comes all of their things. And how to make the wrestling room multi-purpose. Just leave those up for just a second. And then the Performing Arts Subcommittee, they spent probably about half of their time talking about the new auditorium and the design of it, how the seating should work, sight lines. So they decided that the auditorium should have a cross aisle, so that's really an intermediate access point. We'll point that out on the floor plans. And that there should be tiered seating to maximize good sight lines. I think people do appreciate that about the balcony that you have today, but so wanting to replicate that in a way. Things that should be directly accessible off the stage, like the scene shop, so that things can be fluidly brought on and off the stage, and that performers can cross behind the stage as well. So that helps set some of the floor plan. Wanted the music spaces to be in close proximity to the auditorium, as well as thinking about the many events that they go do, so wanting to make sure that there was easy access to outside and bus loading for things like instruments and sets and equipment. And that the orchestra, there should be an orchestra pit for the auditorium. And then just a couple details, talked about how many practice rooms and ensemble rooms and how the dressing room should be arranged. So I'll show you those on the floor plan when we get there. Okay, so this is a draft site plan. I'll go through the major points of it. So this is the property right off of Highway 14 is kind of just cut off on the bottom part of the page to the south. North is up in this. The road at the top there is 18th, and then the road that's a diagonal is Bixby. So we are looking at the proposed site plan. The majority of the parking is planned to be to the north of the building, and that's encircled by a parent drop-off, or parent or other family member drop-off loop. So there are 2 access points, and we've been working very closely with the city and the county on exactly where those should be and how far they should be spaced. And there's been an ongoing traffic study that's been collaborative between those 3 entities. I think we meet about every other week with them. So cars can come off of 18th in 2 different ways and enter that. The bulk of the parking is for students, although there is a designated area for staff and visitors close to the building. And you can see the main entry is called out there with the text and the arrow. It's in the big blue building labeled there, and it faces north and it's on the western side. There is also an activities entrance, so that if you had multiple events going, that you could try to separate some of that traffic. On the west side of the building, my cursor's kind of hovering it, in an effort to always keep buses and car traffic separated, the buses have their own area that's a bus loop, so they can drive down, turn around, and then angle park with their doors along the sidewalk here, and then students can actually enter the building from that west side of the west side. The loading dock is right here and really access to the main mechanical space. We'll get to the floor plan, I'll show you, but some of the industrial technology and agriculture spaces are here with good vehicle access. And then last but not least, the stadium. So the stadium is directly east to the building, and these spaces here are the activities and athletic spaces, so that's where that visual relationship, as well as trying to maximize use of the main parking lot for events and activities. We have recently had a lot of meetings talking about the number of fields and the kind of field and what direction should they face and all of that. So we have a couple softball fields here. This is intended to be the varsity softball venue. And then some multi-purpose practice fields. We've got our track and field events here. And then across the crossing, we've got a couple practice baseball fields. So those things have all been in frequent development. And then last but not least, we've got our 8 tennis courts right here. The bus loop will be striped so that it can provide additional parking for events. So that boosts the parking count up. Can you think of anything else?
And this site is nearing completion of design, but there's still some things to work out with the city and the county and the state actually on some of the access things. So there might be some minor shifting that happens in the plan, but it's starting to settle in.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in? Are there any ag components that are visible here? Agriculture?
Oh, sure, like that. So I think you might be referencing in the referendum imagery, there was the experimental agriculture area. So in meeting with that department, I don't think they have immediate plans to have that programming, but I think there's plenty of space if you have that in the future.
And there is an egg lab and a greenhouse attached to the building, and so I think their thinking is that they would start with that and maybe build to a field area at some point.
That came from the user groups, right? The egg department said they have no need for that at this time, but maybe in the future.
And we do have that acreage just to the south there where that's
Yeah.
still kind of undeveloped that could potentially be experimental. if we need to.
Absolutely. And there's some around these fields too. The scale is so big, it's a big piece of property, so. Y'all keep going?
So to dovetail with all of those things, another thing we like to have when we work on a building is what I call the concept. It's kind of the overlay of design that goes on top of it. We help develop that. It's largely based on things that we heard from the core group, so there's a lot of that. And then we really believe that a high school is a signature piece in any town or any community. And so we really invested a lot in trying to understand your area and what would make the building unique to your school district and your city. So we looked, one of our inspirations is just to look at the map of the city and the different components that make it up. So we talked about the downtown, the residential areas, all of the important commercial things that are going on in Owatonna, recreational things like the parks and other pieces, and then obviously surrounded by agriculture, still a very important part of your district. And then we looked at some precedents for what that means in terms of architecture, not just in Owatonna, but everywhere, kind of looking at them as design prototype ideas. We also looked at the crest of Owatonna, which I understand is being updated. This is the older version of it, but what that means and the things that are valued in that. We're not taking anything literally off the crest, but just kind of looking at the pieces that have been identified as part of the community. So cornucopia, the river, education, drama, machinery, locking gears, and obviously agriculture with the wheat. Some of the pieces that we have started to build upon are when we look at the commons and the river and downtown, textures and colors, just the idea of natural things. And a big piece that came out of the core group is the idea of signature learning spaces being on display. So one of the things from the very beginning of this process, far before the referendum, was an investment in career education and trying to build vocational programs that help support the businesses in your community. And that really is a big theme, and you'll see later on how we are trying to bring that out in the design. Residential learning communities has been interesting. So as Sal mentioned before, the classroom areas are organized into what the core group called learning communities. They also use the term cul-de-sac, which I think was a really nice thing. In order to build more teamwork and collegiality within the learning areas, education is on display. There's quite a bit of transparency in there. And what we really created is like a collaborative lab space or a studio space for education to happen. The core group very understood that one of the essential qualities of that is to make it feel like it's a community, a smaller community. And so we'll show you that in the design and how we went about doing that. But they equated that to a cul-de-sac in a neighborhood. And then obviously recognizing the importance of the commercial things and the successful businesses in your area. So we have some of that also woven into the design. And then for the recreational spaces in the athletic and performance area, we're really trying to leverage some more natural motifs in the design just to help differentiate. When you have a building this big, it's actually important to have subtle variations across the building that kind of help you identify that you're in different parts of the building. So we have a little bit different theme going on in those areas.
All right, so I'm going to walk you through the floor plan. I'll start by saying this is the first level. It is, after much debate at the core group level, a 3-story building. So we'll go through each level. North is up in this again, so it matches the floor or the site plan. So we've got the main entry right here. The main parking lot and drop-off loop would be just off screen here, and then the stadium is kind of just barely cut off here for orienting you. So right next to the main entry is the administration. So for processing and security and general oversight, and then after that you enter into the commons. And the core group really felt it was important for everybody to feel like they were on the commons. So you'll see that the learning spaces really encircle the commons on all 3 stories. And then on this floor, we have a few different learning communities. So we have about half of the science learning community. We have nursing, culinary arts, business, and then the IT, ag, and industrial technology. So there's woods, metals lab. They both have garage doors with access to the outside as well as a large bay space. So for vehicle access, here's the ag lab with an attached greenhouse that faces south. And then these gray spaces that are a little hard to read the labels, those are really the main building support. So building storage, main mechanical room, receiving, etc. And then a digital fabrication lab and a couple flexible classrooms as a part of this learning community. The commons will also serve as the space that students eat lunch. So the servery and kitchen directly back up to that. Also an important relationship that food deliveries are very efficient, so directly connected to receiving. And then the commons serves as a lobby for the auditorium as well, so that if you have a performance, you could choose to either use the main entry or the activities entry. The auditorium has many access points, so the cross aisle is about halfway through. It's a little bit hard to see, but on this floor, you can come around this way and get into the auditorium and enter the cross aisle level, or right here. Or you can go upstairs, I'll show you some staircases, and enter at the back of the auditorium in 2 places as well. This is the stage right here. The scene shop directly connects to the stage, and then the scene shop has exterior vehicular access for loading and unloading of materials. And then the music suite is attached, and their main hallway provides as a cross aisle behind the stage. This is the green room and makeup space. We've got a couple bathrooms for performers, and then our band, orchestra, and choir rooms. Some of the smaller boxes you see in here are offices, storage rooms, and the practice and ensemble rooms. And then out here we have space for instrument storage in a commons. And then keeping going this way, we enter into the activities and athletics areas. So there's the activities entrance with the athletic director's office directly attached to it. We've got the foundation room. Do we want to talk a little bit about that?
We'll let Bob and Jeff talk about that. But
Want to talk a little bit about the story of the foundation room?
Sure. The story of the foundation room is we didn't have this attached to the school at the very beginning. So what we did is Jeff went and talked to the ISD 761 Foundation and also the Owatonna Foundation and procured some money to help add square footage to our district or to our school. It's gonna be a great build, or a great room where it's gonna be glass on the inside and glass to the outside, so we can use it during events, whether they're inside events or outside events. And Corey Kath is gonna love it because now he has a space that he doesn't have to move a whole bunch of desks around and things like that. That he's gonna use it for his staff meetings, and if Rotary comes in and needs to have a place to meet at the high school, this kind of room is going to be awesome for our community to be able to come in and use, whether it's during the school day or after hours. So I think we did a really nice job of working with our community, working with the two foundations, and they brought it forward, and we are going to have an outstanding room there for our community to use.
Kind of like a more flexible foundation, or flexible of the forum room that's currently at the high school.
Right, I was just gonna say, so
Yep.
this is kind of the small group forum, just a lot more flexible
Right.
with a lot more visibility for use, so.
What's the size of that room? Can you give us a perspective?
It's like 2,200, I think. Yeah, so a typical classroom's 900, so it's, each side is 1,100, it's got a divider wall. So it's pretty good size.
Like 4 classrooms together, sort of?
About that space, yeah.
Yeah, about.
Or about twice as big as this room, maybe a little bit bigger than twice as big as this room.
With the wall open, we could seat about 100 people, maybe, thereabouts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
We really see this being used a lot for, like if you have a basketball or volleyball tournament, and you need a place to sell your concessions, and we don't want to use maybe the high school concession stand. If they bring their own stuff in, it's an area for people to hang out and just have a great time, to be honest with you.
Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Banquets, parents' nights, community usage where we have people come in that want to show the video of their trip to Italy and those sorts of things that we have going on for our community. Easy access right in the activities door, so they don't have to walk through the entire building. And again, there'll be entrance off of what Sal will show you in a bit, which is our plaza area out to the stadium, as well as entrance out to the main hallway.
I even see some of our smaller sports, their banquets at the end of the year, using this room instead of having to go out and rent something from somewhere else to be able to utilize this space.
Other things that are pretty prominently featured off the activities lobby are the game gym. So there are 2 full courts and then the center game court in this space that does have all of the bleacher seating, which is intended to be loaded from the walking track level. So I'll explain that a little bit more on the next floor. There is connectivity between the game gym and the auxiliary gym with doors both on the game floor level and on the walking track upstairs, but there is a wall between them, so you could have events going on at the same time without disturbing each other. And then across the hall are all of the support spaces. So we've got our locker rooms, we've got our main set of bathrooms, we've got concession stand, and then the training room is right here. And that's that criteria from the activities and athletics group that those spaces were co-located so that they could serve inside and events outside at the stadium. That was very important to them. Also on this floor is the wrestling room and some storage.
Paul, can you explain the locker room situation, which is kind of unique to us?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time. I think we might have had as many meetings about the locker rooms as any space in the building. And the reason is I think the world is changing. These locker rooms have all of the traditional settings that you'd expect in a locker room, so you can preserve those traditions. But it also builds in a lot more privacy for students. So there's privacy changing areas, kind of like you think of in a clothing store or something like that. The showers are all built around single cubicles, basically. And then we worked with the coaches and the FIAD staff to kind of interconnect things, so it gives them some flexibility to handle larger crowds or bigger teams when they do that. And then another interesting feature is the FIAD lockers are actually not in a locker room. They're in the hallway. And so you don't change at your FIAD locker. You get your stuff out of there and then you go to a place to change. And we have a couple of different options that we worked on with that group there. So I think I'm hopeful that it'll be a model that other schools will look at and go, why haven't we done this a long time ago? But it's really built around privacy and flexibility within there. And I guess it also is going to feature some really nice lockers in the varsity locker room too, which are part of the Winger donation. So that'll be another great signature space.
Another nice aspect about this is during events at night, whether it's say a girls basketball game, normally the visiting girls team has to come use the current boys locker room, which then is off limits to our current boys teams that are trying to practice or coming home from games and they can't get into their own. The way this one is designed, we will be able to utilize boys' locker rooms and girls' locker rooms all at the same time because of the way the doors are and the separate showers and the separate bathrooms, that our boys could get into their varsity locker room and the visiting girls could be right next door and never see each other in there. So we really took a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to design that so we didn't have to misplace or displace other people.
We alluded to it a little bit in talking about the foundation room, but then this would be the main plaza once you get inside the stadium. So ticket procurement would be out at this ticket booth here, and then there's a series of gates or access points into the stadium. So then there's a plaza here, and that's where you can access the bathrooms, concessions, etc. And then this side would be the home bleacher side, and the side that's cut off the page would be the visitor bleacher side. Okay, I'll go upstairs. So to orient us, the auditorium is here, so it is not a balcony, but the tiered seating is steep enough that it actually connects between two floors. So you can go up the stairs and access the back of the auditorium, and the control room is also located at the back. Penthouse are mechanical spaces, so those are where the air handling units are located in various spots. This is the walking track around the game gym, so it surrounds all four sides of the game gym. And then there is the ability to keep going and go around the auxiliary gym. So there's kind of a short path and a long path. Visitors would come in the activities entrance here and either go up this staircase or this staircase to get to that walking track, and that's how they'll get on the bleachers. Also on this level right off the walking track are the fitness and weight space and a flexible classroom. And they have a significant amount of transparency overlooking the stadium. The other, back going to the academic side of the building, we have the other learning communities. So we have the other half of the science department, and then the English department is located in two communities on either side of the media center. So right when you walk into the commons at the back, you'll see in some of our renderings, is the media center very prominently located and centrally located. Student services are located on this floor, so things like counselors, social workers, cultural liaisons, the College and Career Center, in an effort to be as close as possible to students, so centrally located, kind of in the heart of their world. So that's an interesting development. And then I should have pointed out on first floor, but you can see here there's some presence of the special education in every learning community, so those are labeled.
Sal, can you point out the elevators?
Thank you. Sure. Okay, so last time I did this, I pointed out one of them wrong. So
Keep going left, right
this
there.
one, there's
Yep.
an elevator right here.
And right above the English one, right there.
Right here, yes. So there's two elevators. They're located so that they both can serve all three stories, but then this one is easily located for either getting at the back of the auditorium or up onto the walking track.
That's what I was wondering about the walking.
Yep. And there will be accessible seats down on the game court level too. Will be required to have that. But.
And the auditorium's got multiple locations too, so you can sit in the back, in the
Yep.
middle, or anywhere in the front.
Good question.
One thing we didn't mention on the first floor, we were dealt a little bit of a curve blow this spring when the state issued a new state building code. That requires you to have, all educational buildings in the state now must have a tornado shelter in them. Which is not something that we had.
Big enough to house everyone, right?
To house all of the occupants of the building.
Yeah.
That's not something we had budgeted for. Fortunately, if there's any positive out of 2020, construction values have been, you're in a very competitive market. So we think we're going to be able to absorb all that. But the locker room area and the wrestling room area all are built to withstand or designed to withstand a 250 mile an hour wind. So that'll be your tornado area. And as well, it has to have water and electricity and all that kind of stuff.
Restrooms and all that.
Yeah, during the event. So
Emergency power.
So I think it's a great thing for your community. It was a little bit of a heartburn for us to figure out. We think we have it figured out.
Is that where it landed? Because it was moved around the building, but structurally it's difficult to do.
Yeah, originally we were going to do half of it there and half of it in the full tech areas that are the large bay spaces. And because of the needs of that space and wanting, particularly in the large bay space, they want a big door to get big equipment in for various things. And that became very difficult to structure for tornado. So we've decided to consolidate over on the other side.
Good point, Paul. More learning communities. Again, you can see on the second and third floor really encircles all 3 stories of the commons. So we have the social studies learning community, we have math, and then world language, and then last but not least, we have fine arts, and they have a digital studio very prominently featured on the commons, and located close, at least visually, to the performing arts areas and music.
In all of these floors, the classrooms that surround it, not everyone, but a bunch of them will have huge windows that overlook the commons area. Pretty neat. You'll see it soon.
Yeah, so we had mentioned earlier one of the ideas of the signature spaces. Really, the whole floor plan is driven around trying to get as much of the academic area to surround that commons as the heart of the city or the heart of the school. And so you can see we've tried to get those special spaces to front that out in all cases. And that was actually a significant part of making it a 3-story building too. The core group quite early on understood that the more we stacked it up, the more they could have a presence on that commons. And we hope that you like the results when we show you that, which I think is coming up.
Can you, maybe I'm jumping the gun, can you talk about light and the ceiling? Like I'm thinking over that comments, but maybe that's coming. So
That's coming.
I'll wait.
Yeah, again, our attempt at one of the core group commitments was to get daylight wherever possible.
Okay.
And so we have some images that I think will really help demonstrate what we think you're going to see.
We actually also had our in-house sustainability committee. They're running some daylighting models on our floor plan, and is there glare at any time of the year? And so, and then also in our collaborations with Viricon on the type of glass that the building's going to have, really working to try to maximize that while also balancing energy. So.
Another, or do you want to do this?
No, go for it.
Another discussion we had with the core group, we spent quite a bit of time talking about academic space, and these are just some prototype models that we had worked through with them. One of the concepts of the building is that teachers really use space flexibly to support whatever learning they're trying to create. And for years, we've been in the model that all classrooms, general classrooms, have to kind of be the same. Sometimes I refer to that as the least common denominator, because each one of them has to be kind of a Swiss Army knife. In the new building, what we've done is made spaces that are slightly different as part of each learning community, and therefore they can have different things. So the idea is that probably one of them is going to have a little bit more technology, and so if a teacher has something that's technology group-based, for instance, they might go to that space that day. Several of them can combine together 2 rooms to do team teaching or be separate. And this was a model that we worked through with them. So the solid lines are more like hard walls, the dashed lines are more like operable walls, and then in some cases on the right too, you can see that there's some spaces that don't have distinct walls around them. Also, the more that you shift towards personalized learning, which I really think is a big shift is happening in education towards that, the less you need a fully enclosed room for direct instruction. And again, clearly direct instruction will have a place in education forever, but the idea of doing it every hour of every day, all day long is probably going by the wayside. And so this was a look at trying to figure out how space could more flexibly be suited to students doing more independent work or work supported by their teacher rather than lecture-based format. And then this is one example of the spaces that Sal was talking about before. This is one of the learning communities. And so you can see some different features. We've numbered the spaces there. Classroom 1 is more of an enclosed room, so it has 4 walls and a conventional door basically that goes into it with a little bit more visibility. Again, there's supervision that goes out to that flex space. Classroom 2, on the other hand, it's really a 3-sided classroom. So it's a little bit more flexible and directly connected to that central space, which is a breakout learning space. And then between classrooms 2 and 3, you can see that symbol there. That is an operable wall. So that can open up in classroom 2 and 3, can become a team teaching area. Or it can close up and classroom 3 becomes a pretty much an enclosed 4-sided classroom, a more traditional classroom. Classroom 4 then is another enclosed classroom that has some visibility out to the front, so there's quite a bit of glass in that. And then another operable wall that goes into classroom 5. So those two can, again, pair. The central space, the flex space, is meant to be a breakout learning space. So anytime you want more space for your students, or you have some students that are ahead or behind or whatever, and you want to have them go out and do some more independent study, you have a space right outside your room that you can see and still supervise. There is a special ed space in each one of the learning communities, and sometimes more than one. And then another interesting feature is the staff space. So the idea with each one of these learning communities is that teachers don't own a particular classroom all day long. They work with their peers to determine on any day or week what's the best for the lessons that they're doing that day. So in exchange, what we've done is made a professional staff office. So they have a place to keep their personal belongings for sure, to keep tests and all those kind of things secured, but also a collaborative space for them so that they get to have some interactions with staff. And then just outside of that, we call it the porch, but it's a small area that is outside the staff area and a great place to meet with your teacher or get some extra support in
Part of
between
that,
classes.
part of the staff space, we're not gonna have any staff lounges. Part of that staff space will have microwaves, sinks, refrigerators in it for each of the cul-de-sac or the learning areas.
And then there's one of those associated with each learning community. So the idea is that you're kind of making a family out of the people within that learning community. And then these were just some inspirational images that we pulled from the internet to look at different ways that we can start to create the image of the building. I won't go into them in too much detail, but we're looking for different themes of, on the top there, how nature can kind of come into the building, and not necessarily like pictures of nature, but how we can bring some more organic forms in to help the building feel modern and also comfortable. And the lower left is a great example of a VOTEC space. So it's not the shop class I went to
It's a
school
little different than what we have
but
now.
it looks a lot more like a professional, like a modern factory or a car repair shop or something like that often look this way now. So it's trying to make those kind of fun spaces. And this is an image of the new commons for Owatonna High School. So we are standing just inside the front door.
There's a little map in the bottom left if people want to orient themselves. We put the red dot where it's taken from, if that helps anybody.
So we're standing right next to the main office. We've just walked in the door. And I'll go from left to right. On the left, there's a stairway that leads up to the auditorium, so you can load the back of the auditorium, as well as a connection into the academic area up there. You'll see around the space those boxes. We've got a number of names for them, but those indicate the signature spaces. And a great example of putting education on display. So there's a big picture window there, and the idea that each one of those things will have learning going on in the inside and has a presence on the commons. So the upper left one is the art room. The right one is a science room, Discover. The one on the bottom on the right is it's labeled Care right now. Those labels are tentative, but that's the nursing lab. So the idea is to give all of those things some presence on the commons. On the lower left, then I'll return over there. That's the servery area, so that loads out into the cafeteria. Up in the back, in the middle, is the media center up there, or learning commons. In front of that is what we call a learning stair. So there's a one-story set of big steps to sit on there. So it gives you kind of an informal amphitheater within the commons, and then a regular circulation stair next to that. And then behind all of that is the tech ed area, or the career pathways area back there. So that all is connected to the back of the commons as well. You can also see some of the themes. So this is the core of the building. It's meant to be kind of like downtown, kind of like Main Street, kind of like the river. So we have a lot of fun things going on with daylight coming in from the top up there as well as the far end. And then the idea that we have all of this stuff sort of surrounding the town square. And then there's another view from, now we've moved to the back. We're at the kind of the walkway that connects the second level across, and we're looking back towards the front door.
Media center is just to your right.
Yeah, just to your right. And then the auditorium is in the corner there, right next to the door.
So Lori, there's your answer on the glass and the light coming in.
Yeah, so talk about that. They look like they are, I want to say undulating, or they're rippled, or they're...
The ceiling?
The ceiling is, yeah. Yep. So we were trying to invoke, again, making you feel a little bit like you're outside town square, so it's a little bit like clouds or waves on the river or some metaphor like that. We try not to be too direct with things, but use some of those forms to make it feel like an interesting space.
What about the passive solar component, in the building with glass and so on? Can you comment on that, or just the efficiency? I mean, you made a passing reference, but
Yeah, so this would be a northern-facing glass. So nice diffuse light. I'll go back one. It's a little hard to see in some of these images, but there's high windows on the sides, and then a significant amount at the south as well. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking to do is obviously get as much space as with balanced natural daylight, but you don't ever want it to be glare, right? Because then people will be uncomfortable parts of the day. And then we work closely with Viricon on trying to get the right balance of letting a little bit of solar heat in while also not losing it at other times of the year. So we've been going back and forth with them on what types of gases are between the panes of glass or what types of coatings they could put inside. We've had a couple exciting meetings with them. So
The beauty of having Viricon in town, and we basically said, tell us how to do this. They're the glass experts, so it's great having them right here.
yeah. Maybe I'll keep
going.
rocking. Yeah, so we just turned around. We're on the second floor, so the Commons is behind us now, but we're looking really at the media center, and it is very open to the building. So we've got our some collaborative, flexible, small group space. Also housed in the media center is going to be the tech support, but the books are able to be secured so that this part of the media center could be open for events, but then you can still lock up your resources. And there are aspects of it that are 2 stories, so some presence up on 3rd floor as well. And then there is a crossover between the learning communities on 3rd floor, is what we're looking at here. You can just see a small group or conference rooms here. This is a view of one of those learning communities. We're actually in one half of the English area. So these are the classrooms 4 and 5 Paul was talking about. So they each have transparency to the flex area, and they have an operable wall between them. The staff porch is kind of what this overhang is. It just barely cut off the image. Some built-in individual work counters here. And again, really going for that still academic, but much more comfy feeling of the residential. And then at the back here is that open classroom number 2 is what we're seeing through and then seeing to the outside.
One thing you'll note is that you don't see a bunch of lockers in this.
Yeah.
So this is essentially the hallway of the high school. So we also worked through that. We're going through a transition time. Most adults don't know it, but most students in high school don't use their locker and haven't for quite a few years. So we are providing lockers, and I don't remember the count. It's about 30%, I think, of the population of the building. So there's lockers available for people, but no one really saw the value in having a locker for everyone if they're not going to be used. So what we've done is put the lockers into core spaces. So we've conveniently not taken a picture of where they are. They are close by. But they are not in the learning environment. And what that allows, it allows that all to be opened up and become much more flexible for people.
Just a couple other views. So down from the other end of the learning community, you can see again some more individual workspaces and really just trying to be marked by flexibility while still using architecture to create definitions. So it's just not wide open.
And again, each one of these communities is a certain set of teachers and students working together. We're really trying to create more of a sense of home, more of a collaborative environment. And again, teachers don't own one of those rooms, they own all of those rooms together. So we're really trying to make an environment where they collaborate.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it, looking at this hallway compared to what we currently walk down? It's a total change.
And are the teachers ready for that? I mean, are they comfortable with
So
that vision?
on Friday, Corey didn't give them this exact presentation, but another one, and they were ecstatic when they took a look at it. And I talked to Greg Sullivan just the other day, and he said it was amazing the fire that they had after that morning meeting. So they're very excited.
It's been an interesting process. So we're in a transitional time in education, I guess, not just with lockers, but other things. For years, people have been talking about 21st century learning, and we're 20 years in, and a lot of people still are wondering. I do honestly believe, at least for the first half of the 21st century, it's about personalized learning. And freeing yourself of the trappings of the past to think about that is a critical part of it. And the core group, I think, really had the vision to do that. Mm-hmm. When we took and showed them some other schools that were based on some of these concepts, it became very clear to them right away, and they reached, our version of consensus is everyone agrees to move forward. They were able to do that last spring, and we were able to develop the design. And since that time, I guess we didn't mention as part of our process, we also do a whole nother round of what we call user group meetings, where we've met with virtually everybody that works at the high school, I think.
Just about.
Pretty close.
Well, we had 25 user groups, and we met at least 3 times with each one of them.
That's an input session, but they all got exposed to the design there. And that, I think, created some gulps with people as they thought about that. But now we're several months more down the line. And I think it's really starting to catch on.
I can tell you I've sat in on, I think, all but one or two. From the very first user group meeting to where we're at right now, they were like, oh, really? Because it's different than what they're used to where they are right now, they're ready to go. And it's amazing to just watch this group work with our group to get them from one spot to move them to that next level. And it's fantastic in my eyes watching it happen.
It's an interesting year for teachers to be thinking about being flexible. So it's been a actually really exciting time to talk about a building because I think a lot of constraints have been removed or maybe pre-held beliefs.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes from the spring from Michelle Krell actually is that after things had gone down, school was shut down, and then you transitioned to distance learning. She was remarking, I think through the haze of everything that was happening, that it was really fascinating to see teachers understand that things can be done differently and still work. And it really was a sort of a watershed moment, I think. Convenient timing, but I will also say that, you have 2 years before this building opens. There's still work to do.
Oh, yeah.
I think you'll need to work on curriculum and professional development that helps to support this different model, but we have a lot of momentum going in the right direction, I think.
Keep rolling. There we go.
This is a view of the main reception area. You can kind of see the commons beyond in that open door. We'll go through a couple of these. Then this is just a little bit closer up view. So we're back in the commons. The office would be on the very left-hand side here. This is the main entry vestibule here. And then this shows the volume of the auditorium a little bit better. So you could go in here, or you walk underneath and around these columns to get to the other side, or you could go up this staircase and get to the back of the auditorium right here. And this also shows the path down to the activities and athletics area.
And this is a shot from the inside of the new auditorium. So you can see we've got some forms. We're in the natural part of the building, so trying to be a little bit more organic with things. Some nice clouds that roll over the top, and then wood paneling on the side. And then those white pieces, I think in real life won't quite be so prominent until they turn the lights on, because those are all lit up. And they are color changed, so they can actually be part of the performance. You can change the colors of the walls to support the performance.
Green for wicked, that's what I've always been saying.
Yep.
It's not for Fairmont.
This is also showing the stage setup for a musical performance. So it's showing the Wenger music shell out on the stage, or that can all be put away and set it up more for a theatrical performance. It does have a full fly. So there's all the rigging you need to fly sets completely off the stage in there. And then, Sal, you talked about the cross aisle. So that is shown, you can kind of see it halfway through the auditorium there. There's an aisle that goes across, and then it's kind of low slope in the front with some tiers that allow a little bit more accessibility up there, and then steeper seats in the back, so you get better sight lines from the back of the theater. And that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're going there.
And then there's a scene or a shot from on the stage looking back.
So the one group, the performing arts group, went and we looked at a whole bunch of different auditoriums, and they came up with, let's not do the stairs all the way down to the very bottom, but just do it on the upper part. And then people were worried about, oh my gosh, if you're sitting in the middle of that lower area, that people are going by. This is not going to be like our current auditorium where Mark at 6'3" or whatever he is has to sit like this or get up. You should be able to sit and just barely move, and somebody can walk right in front of you. It's going to have plenty of knee space.
We do wider aisles in the front area.
So I'm assuming the latter or the rear portion of this will somehow, you can dim lights and change things so that if you really just need half that space, it feels like you have half that space.
Yep, that was another benefit of this arrangement. I think the core group, or the subcommittee, I should really say.
And Lori, the beauty of it is we can take some, right in the middle section, right at that cross aisle, you can take about 8 seats out, and then they can move the sound booth down to there so that you don't have to use it way in the back as well.
Reminds me of the Lakeville Auditorium.
I think we have one more graphic.
I think there's a side view of the
this is this is what we call a section perspective. So we're kind of like cutting a slice down. It looks like a model, but this I think helps explain the relationship. So the control room is at the back. You can get into the auditorium at the back. We have our steeper tiered seating here. This is the cross aisle, and then our shallower tiered seating. And then the stage is about at the same height as the cross aisle, so that you still get a good sightline in that front. You can't go any lower or you wouldn't be able to see up on the stage. This is the fly loft, so that'll be the tallest part of the building, so that scenes can fly off. And then last but not least, we've got the orchestra pit underneath the very front of the stage there.
And how many seats? 1,600?
No,
No,
800.
900.
800.
Eight something.
1,600 bleacher seats. That must be
Yeah.
what maybe you read that. Yep.
800?
Yep.
I think it's like 820 or something like that.
Yeah, like 823, I think, at final count. Yep.
Just seats a few more than we currently concede, but all of these seats actually fit adults.
Correct. You won't have to get there at 4 for an 8 o'clock performance to save your seat.
We did talk about actually pre-referendum about having a bigger auditorium.
I wanted to just clarify. Did we?
Yeah.
What did we promise our? Yeah.
800.
What was the conversation?
800.
800.
So the struggle is there actually are very few auditoriums that are bigger than 1,000 seats, especially at the high school level. And the reason is it's hard to fill them sometimes. And so what we did with the district before the referendum is looked at sort of what you do, how you do it, and how many people. And the reality is that you have a couple of events that are quite large that you need to do multiple shows for, and we probably weren't going to get enough seats for that anyway. But on the other side, you have dozens and dozens of events that have smaller crowds. And if the theater's too big, it's half empty, and you're playing to an empty house. So we found that between 600 and 800 is usually kind of the sweet spot for high schools that capture most of the things that people do with a pretty nice number.
Yeah.
This is a view of the school store right off the commons. So obviously there's a suggestion of some ability to sell apparel there and be very prominently featured.
The cool thing about that is they'll be able to bring like a rack of clothes maybe out. They can open up the one door, and then the O encircles the Husky. That's kind of cool.
When the store slides, the Husky will go into the O.
This will be part of our business entrepreneurial pathway. So.
All right, I think we'll move down into the music and athletic space. So this is the music suite entry. So off of this is the main hallway. The commons would be to our left down that hallway, and the activities would be to our right. And they're, one of the goals of the core group, and we've worked with the administration, is trying to have lots of opportunities to celebrate student work and history. So you can see at the entrance to the music suite a suggestion of some display cases. Then we'll step inside.
I can pause for just 1 minute and talk about that. So our OHS museum has kind of been a piece that we've heard from community members and constituents around, and we are embracing that, but we're not doing it in one particular spot in the high school. It will be a walking tour of the high school, and this actually came from Mr. Kath, where in different parts of the building, so you'll see here artifacts, history of Owatonna music, you'll see here prominently displayed outside of our music suite. Whereas if you travel a little closer to the auditorium, you might see more things that would be show bills and things like that that have more of a theatrical standpoint. Likewise, hallway leading to the gymnasium, Hall of Fame, So we want to spread out the history throughout the building versus having one spot where everything is located. So it'll really add a nice walking tour of the building to see some of those historical artifacts.
This is a view from just inside the Fine Arts and Performing Arts Suite. So you can see the entrance to the choir room here, and then the orchestra room. We have a couple practice rooms, and then these are all of the instrument storage cabinets. And then if we kept going down, you'd see the entrance to the band room. The auditorium is just to our left, and the green room makeup is kind of just out of view here. I think the next view. So we are right in front of the orchestra door here, kind of looking back at the entrance, and the ensemble room is on the other side.
So this is really the same idea of trying to make more of a community out of the spaces. So the music storage actually becomes kind of a common space, and we would anticipate students before and after school, when they're dropping off their instruments, would hang out there and create a sense of community around that interest.
Inside the green room where they can change, they'll have the same kind of changing rooms that they have there in the athletic area. So there'll be a big wall of mirrors with lights all around them, and each individual chair, and then behind them will be about 6 or 8 changing rooms where they'll full doors, so it can be by both genders can be in there at the same time. We don't have to worry about anything. So
these lockers are not locked, right? So is this space I just think of the
We-
value
we're
of
u-
those instruments sitting out there.
No, we're using Winger, so I'm assuming there'll be some doors on them. This is just,
I don't think it shows up here, but the doors are actually meshed so that they breathe, so the infants get air.
Yeah.
But that would all be
Yeah,
Winger
they'll have
music
locks.
storage stuff there.
so like I said earlier, we're lucky. We got Viricon for glass. We have Winger for storage for music instruments and athletic stores. So we're smiling. This is great.
Bob, did you just say that you think you have enough storage?
No,
Is that-
I didn't say if we had. I said it's nice to have them in town. That's
You want to do these ones?
So now are down at the athletic entry or the activities entry on the other end of the building. So that's just to our right. And at the corner here, we're looking into the corner of the game gym. And this is not quite done yet. This corner that's shown white is kind of a blank canvas, but we're working on ways to get some branding and a little bit more expression. So maybe some of the history of athletics. We also anticipate now we'll probably put some TVs on that corner, and so you can have a little bit of messaging and things going on with events there. Other prominent features here, those two stairs that Sal pointed out before, the one down there and one here, are meant to guide people up so that you can top load the gym. There is also the opportunity to come in on the game floor for athletes or smaller events, but try to encourage people to go up. Another fun innovation I think that was created, this corner there is actually open. You can kind of see it's a counter with windows that look into the game gym. That was from our user groups and discussions with various people, but it's meant to be the ticket booth. But instead of being a little glass window with a hole in it that only is ever a ticket booth, it can be used for anything. So if somebody wants to sell cookies or popcorn there, they can do that. Or if you have other events, that's a way to greet people at the door. Also might be a great place to have a hall monitor station maybe for parts of the day or different things like that. So really everything we did in the building, we were always looking for ways to make them more flexible and multi-use. And so this thing can have a life beyond just selling tickets.
The TVs that Paul mentioned too will be live streaming the game that's actually happening so that you're able to come in there and you can, if you have little ones that you have to be out in the hallway with, or you're at the concession stand, things like that, you'll be able to monitor what's still going on. So.
We're looking to do the exact same thing for the auditorium as well. The auditorium user group, we looked at having monitors scattered on the first floor and the second floor. So when it's time to come back in for the play and the break's over, they can either ring a bell or make an announcement, and it shoots right out onto the television. So
You can see a little bit of that, the Athletic Hall of Fame here. I think we have a couple other images as well, but really trying to maximize distributing that.
And again, this is the natural part of the building. So we have these big wood columns and beams that go through this sort of great hall that connects the activities area over to the main commons.
So now we're up on the second floor at we went to the top of those stairs. We were standing down here, and this provides so the music suites to our left. You can see the foundation room in the distance here, and then the stadium would be just outside there, and then the walking track is on the other side of these windows here.
And now we are in the game gym. So we're standing on the floor looking at the side bleachers. You'll also notice that there are bleachers on the ends of each court too. So you get smaller bleachers there that create a four-sided experience. And then there's also the walking track up above. So people can actually stand up there and watch the game as well. And we are going to reproduce basically the finish of your floor that you have in the current high school, which is a very nice thing that just got redone.
We would assume we'll probably put pep band probably in those end bleachers just so that we reserve other seating. Plus, you also have easy access for instruments and things right off the floors.
A significant amount of natural daylight into this space too, as was important to the subcommittee. So some high windows you can see here.
And we are obviously trying to put a lot of school spirit into this area. The final words and graphics are yet to be determined, so we have to work through a final approval process on all those, but these are an example. And now we're up on the walking track looking back. So that main lobby is right behind us.
right above the ticket booth you're standing.
Yeah. And then that's just a shot from the other side looking back towards the main entry. Looks like a good place for a game. And then this is the auxiliary gym side of things. So We are carrying the theme of the kind of the signature space, the boxes on the outside of the building you'll see in a second. One of them is at the end of the auxiliary gym, and that faces out to the highway. So we're hoping that becomes kind of a signature landmark.
Yeah, that'll look, that one will look right over the varsity softball field.
And then just looking back the other way, we're looking back towards the game gym now. So that wall that's on the far side and those openings go through to the game gym.
You'll notice the walking track is striped, so we can use it for indoor practices for track and field athletes when we typically start when there's snow outside. So,
what kind of surfaces is that going to be?
The walking track itself, it'll be a rubberized surface.
Are there any bleachers in this auxiliary gym?
Yep.
They're about, I think it's about 50 per court. Yeah, they're a little hard to see. They're on the end here.
I think they're gonna make them a little bigger because we're gonna stretch them out to those doors, so I think it's gonna get closer to about 75 each.
Yeah,
And the reason we did that is because this facility will be used more for than just Phi Ed, but it'll also be used for tournaments. So what we'll do is we'll put there'll be a curtain that goes down between those two courts, and then the teams will sit on each side of the curtain, and then the parents can sit on then each end of the court, so then they don't have to have their feet sticking out onto the floor.
All right, should we go outside?
Yeah, let's go outside.
Oh, I forgot we have. So here's a rendering of the weight room. At the views over to the stadium, you can see some windows to the left here, and then the walking track would be just to our right. Obviously, we've got a suggestion of some equipment that we've been working on in the user groups and some of your donation partners.
And another great Cybex My Fitness in town. Nice to have them in town as well.
And then this is a view of the foundation room from right inside the activities entrance. So there's that operable wall between, lots of visibility here as well as to outside. I think we have one from inside the room too. So now we're inside the room. The stadium is outside here. This is the dividing wall between the two halves of the room. Again, maximizing for flexibility.
And another example of where we anticipate putting some of the history artifacts in that area.
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to go outside. I forgot about this. So this is just a massing of the building. So main entrance right here. This is the commons surrounded by our learning communities, the auditorium, and the gym. And that's really influenced how we've thought about the exterior architecture.
And these relate to the colors at the beginning of the different parts of the city.
So just a reminder of some of the precedent imagery. I'm more focused on outside. So the kind of the proportions and massing and how windows are expressed in the commons and more public areas. Working to break down the scale of the building, thinking about how residential architecture works to do that and create a homey feeling. And then the maximizing verticality in the activities areas, which are themed after nature and recreation. And as Paul mentioned, the really putting some of that learning on display in the IT areas as well.
We didn't mention it, but the garage doors going into the auto shop and the IT area, they're going to be glass. So you'll be able to see also what's going on inside there as well.
And so now we're standing in the parking lot looking at the front of your new high school. The commons is that blue frame in the middle with the smaller one being the entrance. The auditorium is on the left. One of the great features that we're working on is the corner of the auditorium there. You can see there's kind of a little pillar. It's not fully developed yet, but that is another one of the contributions that Mr. Kath made to the project. We're going to make that a signature kind of a space, so it will have some lighting in it. We're hoping to work with Viricon to get maybe even some colored glass in there that would relate to some of the great stained glass things that you have in the city. And possibly, again, also have that be, have some lighting changing in it. So again, you can
Have
do
a
some
beacon.
thematic thing like a beacon for the school. And we're really hoping that between that and the blue frames, that really becomes sort of a signature of your building. Yeah.
They're hard to see right with the lighting that we have, but those are bright blue, like royal blue, those frames.
Main office is right next to the main entry here, and then these are the academic parts of the building, and then the activities will have a few more views, but would be to the left here.
A little bit closer view of the front entry. and then we're gonna step around, counterclockwise around the building. So we're shifting to the right now, and we're looking at one of the corners of the 3-story academic area.
You're basically in the bus loop right now, almost
Yeah,
before
bus is the
it goes
big
down
one.
the side.
So it's a very large building, and part of our goal was to help to break the scale of it down a little bit. And then, as Sal mentioned, we looked to some kind of larger scale residential architecture to think about how they break up different masses of the building to not make it feel so big. And then again, applied those frames to spaces to sort of highlight what's going on inside again. Now we're over by the tennis courts, standing in the bus loop, looking at the west side of the building.
So when you're on the highway coming in, that's what you'll see.
No,
not
that
yet.
faces the neighborhood. We'll get to that view in
That's
just a second.
that's the next one. So there's your greenhouse right there that's facing south. You can see that on the bottom.
We're at the southwest corner here.
Yeah.
So here's the greenhouse, and then the loading dock would be kind of just out of view here. You can see the auxiliary gym mass now.
And then this is the view from the highway.
So this is the that large window that was on the walking track level in the auxiliary gym.
We are looking with Viracon to see if there's, because they can screen print windows now, and we're looking to see if there's any kind of branding we can do on there, so you'd be able to see from the highway that this is Owatonna High School, and without making it look gaudy, you know.
And then this is a view of the activities entrance and really stadium plaza. So on the corner here we have the band room, that activities entrance. The foundation room is the lower volume here, and then the 2-story would be the fitness and weights room that overlooks the stadium. So as people approach the stadium, this plaza can really serve for either indoor or outdoor events. And then there's a ticket booth located in that plaza as well. Schedule-wise, I think everybody on the team is proud and excited to say that we haven't really missed a beat despite what the year's been like. So your stakeholders have been very up for switching to meeting digitally, which has been going great. So we are now in the construction documents phase. So we worked with the core planning group and schematic design through about May, did design development over the summer, which a huge part of that is those user group meetings Bob mentioned and Paul. And then we are now transitioning into the really documenting all of that so that Krause Anderson can issue the documents for bidding. The intent is to issue documents for bidding in late January, early February, have them available for a little bit over a month, and ideally come with recommendation for award in March so that they can start construction in spring of 21. It'll take slightly over 2 years to build, so still staying on track for a fall of 2023 opening. And I think with that, we thank you for all the time and all of those people who have put many, many hours in helping us get it right. And we'll take any other questions.
You talked about the flexibility of the main spaces. Are there exceptions? I was thinking about like science rooms, something like that, where it's fairly specialized. So is that true for like the science area, or you still envision flexibility?
Yeah, we're still focused on flexibility. There certainly are things that are more fixed in there. There's some safety concerns that you need to make sure you take care of in the science lab. We also did some special tours with some of the science department and went to look at other high schools just to look at different options. You primarily have 2 models in your science rooms. All of the science rooms are multifunctional in that they work pretty well for the lecture form or part of science as well as labs. Then there's one model where there's kind of perimeter benches that go around the edge, which give the teacher the ability to kind of walk around in the inside of the circle there, if you will, and supervise. Then the other half of the labs, about half of them, are much more flexible where all of the tables are movable and on wheels. And then they can dock them against the outside for lab things. And there's sinks and power on the outside edge. Or they can move those tables around in the middle and be in a lecture format or small group format. So yes, there's some things that are more fixed. I would say in the vocational shops, the metal shop and the wood shop, there's a lot of things that are fixed in there.
Yeah,
The culinary arts lab, a lot of equipment there.
I would say the most flexible rooms that we have are in the 2nd and 3rd floors, where the science rooms, we really do see, Greg Sullivan's gonna have his chemistry room. And, you're not gonna have, somebody else probably going in and using that. And they are not having their own staff areas in science because they're so specialized in what they have. Same thing with the culinary arts and then the IT, the industrial tech and things, that area. But the rest of them are gonna be very flexible.
Good question.
One of the things that strikes me is the scheduling of courses and what a course is going to require in terms of space. And sort of, I don't know, I hope they're ready.
They're ready. Mr. Kath is ready to go.
I'm sure he is.
His mind is always turning, and he is thinking about next year and the year after to be ready for that third year down the road. So they'll be ready to go.
And to be clear, there's all the same number of classrooms that you need for all of your instructors.
Right.
We didn't take any of that away. It's just designed to be more flexible within that.
Mm-hmm.
We do meet every other Monday with the administration, including Corey, to talk through programming decisions or kind of report on next steps. So it's certainly a lot of back and forth.
You guys are all really important, but I want to hear from you.
I was gonna say the school looks amazing. I'm kind of jealous.
You want to go back and do it again, Daniela? Just asking.
You'll have to come to a performance.
Maybe. The school looks amazing. Hold me back so I can go to the school. The auditorium, my mouth dropped. You couldn't see it through my mask, but it did. Trust me.
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's been
good
a lot
job.
of fun to work on.
So, strange question. So, with all the flexibility, as a parent of somebody who was very anal about where they were at any given moment in the time, how are students going to walk into that flexible area and know which of those 5 classrooms they need to be on any given day? I mean, do you envision monitors or?
Yeah, we've talked about monitors. Also, I think it's important to note that they're actually fairly small areas, each one of them. They're about 6. I think the bigger one is maybe 9.
Yeah.
But I think when you walk in there, it'll be actually fairly obvious because it's not a bunch of lockers and closed doors. You actually can see what's going on once you walk into that space. So I'm hoping it will be fairly intuitive, that your teacher will be standing in that flex area and guide you to the place you want to go. But there will be things like monitors and some of the schools.
Might be as easy as a whiteboard even as well, yeah.
Some of the schools that have done this actually find that Spring Lake Park is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They have on Friday afternoon, the teachers sit down and have some collaborative time, and they kind of decide what they're doing the next week, and they set up a schedule basically, and they have it on a screen where they can tell what area to go to.
So they are moving to different spaces within that, depending on their lesson
Yeah.
plan or their.
You bet.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
And it may not be that people are moving every hour of the day. It could be that you're in a space for a week as you work on some particular project to move, but it's really up to the staff to collaborate and find the best way to use the spaces that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm kind of a visual person.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have math, which looked like it was on the 3rd floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were, fortunate enough to have gym right next to it. I mean, from our space that we currently have, I can't visualize.
You'll
how long
have
it would
plenty
take
of
to
time to
from
get to where you're going now.
We actually did a comparison for the core planning group of like an overlay of the footprint of your current high school and the new high school, and I think that was very convincing to them that walking times will be manageable.
Okay.
You really do have quite a
Cut it
sprawling
in half.
campus.
Walking time will be cut in half
Yeah.
just because the way the building is laid out. Because similarly now, if you have a science class in G400
Right.
and you're headed downstairs to A Plaza for English course or to options, that's truly a 5 to 7 minute. And whereas most of these transits are probably in that 3.5 to 4 minute transit, depending upon how much time you stop and talk. Right.
But now they might actually have time to stop and talk.
They may, yeah, exactly.
Just by the nature of the spaces of music and gym, those are a little bit more set off.
Yep.
But most of a student's day is in the rest of the building, and it's quite compact.
It's close, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What, board members, what do you think the community is going to say about this?
Just show them the
Danielle.
pictures. They'll be convinced. Pictures look amazing.
We hope so.
They will. Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Everything seems very inviting. You're invited to come watch a performance. You're invited to come watch a sporting event.
It's good.
Don't you think, especially with come watching a performance, they'll look back and be like, to the common community members such as myself that goes once a year, they'll walk in and be like, ooh, it was that bad.
Right.
Yeah. It really was
yes.
that bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think that whole walking track and athletic thing, I mean, I get pretty excited about that.
Yes.
Second, I mean, I just think that's gonna speak to a segment of our population that just doesn't interact with our high school building very much.
The foundation room and the walking track
Oh.
are very inviting to the community.
Right?
And we envision seeing, obviously, when we open, we're gonna open up the commons for games, for auditorium stuff. It's gonna be open because it's our community's building as well. But the nice thing about the way it's designed is we can close down the educational areas of the building where the commons is wide open. The media center's open, but the books are locked up, so don't have to worry about things walking away. But we want people to come in and see what we have and what our kids are doing on a daily basis. So it's we're pretty excited to see that, but also be able to, like right now, you go to a game, you can go anywhere in our high school. Anywhere. and it's a challenge to supervise that. So this is going to help with supervision, but it's also going to feel, like you said, warm and welcoming when you walk in.
So I know you maybe commented on this. What's the total square footage of our current high school space? And then what is the square footage of this?
So current high school is about 350, but that includes all of the steam tunnels in the 21 building, which actually is a lot of it, and the space under the auditorium. And then I think we're at 316,000 with mechanical spaces for the new.
Oh, so it is fairly comparable, really.
Yeah.
It's just more, again, it's.
It's more compact.
It's a little more
Yes, it
efficient,
is.
yeah.
It's like stacked.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
It looks a lot larger.
Does it?
I think it looks open. I guess is more, maybe not larger, but it looks open.
We have
don't have a lot of high volume space.
We have a lot of wasted space right now in hallways and steam tunnels. Where if you look at, I mean, we have in the new one that we just showed you, we have a bigger gymnasium, we have a bigger auditorium, we have wider hallways, but they're stacked together and they're utilizing the space much more efficient than what we currently have. Because anytime we needed to add on, we had to build hallways to it, and that takes up a lot of space.
Yeah. Our present building is more like an octopus. It just,
Just
it goes on in different directions.
Cut it dead ends.
Got one off and it regrows.
This feels like everything comes back toward the commons. Everything.
Yeah, and it's wet too, like an octopus would be. Building.
Subterranean.
Right. I sat in this room just over a year ago on the night that the bond referendum passed. And if you'd have told me that we were going to end up looking like this, or the Owatonna High School was going to look like this, it's amazing. This is amazing work. And this building is going to serve generations of people that are going to see what happened in 1955 and 1921 when they walk into those areas of the building. But yet they're also going to see what's going to happen in 2041 and 2051. Just an amazing work, and I can't thank you enough. I can't thank the folks that were part of our committees that spent some painstaking hours working through the details of this, and there's still details to come. But I'm just so proud of what this building will be and what it will stand for. In a time when we need hope, this is a ray of hope for our community. So thank you.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Yeah.
I would echo Jeff's sentiments that you too have a unique skill set in drawing people to the table and allowing them to cast this vision. And you didn't come into it with sets of drawings. You started out by explaining that to us. And I'm sure that it had to feel clumsy and awkward at first. Like, was it difficult to get buy-in from people that they needed to get these things out and talk them through?
I think there's a level of frustration in the core planning group at a certain point. Yeah. Like, are you guys gonna bring a drawing back someday? But I think we couldn't have made this drawing without all that conversation. And any drawing we would have showed them, they might have, had preconceived notions of or attached to too early. So I think the process worked really well.
Great work.
Thank you.
Excellent work.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Anything you want to close with on this?
No, I think I probably spent most of my time tonight, so I don't have any comments other than I'm just so proud of where this is headed, and that I just can't wait to put those shovels in the ground and break ground and get this thing to see it come out of the earth and just be a real prize for our community.
We're excited too. I actually kind of feel like we pulled the curtain off a little too soon. In the old days, before we had all this computer rendering stuff, you had to wait till it opened to see all this. And now it's actually kind of hard to wait, right? Because it's 2 more years.
Well, and I'm looking forward to these subsequent opportunities for school board members to walk in, put a hard hat on and a safety vest and eye goggles and walk into the building and see it kind of how it starts to come into being. That's part of I think the joy of seeing the process that happens with it.
Yep.
So,
Paul,
Yeah.
go ahead, Paul.
I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the time. I know it was a long presentation, but we've been pent up for a year, so it was fun.
Thank
Anxious to
you.
see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
We're going to close tonight with board forum. Eric, I'm going to start down on your end.
I don't really have anything right now.
The only thing that I have for board forum, and I'm not looking to make this a long conversation, but we had the vote, and so the first item passed, the second item did not carry, and I just want to get a sense from you folks. What's your take on that? How do you feel about that? What's your sense of things?
I'm surprised, honestly, that number one passed, just with where we're at in our world and in our nation. I'm not surprised about number two. I think people next year are going to be really surprised what they voted against and what that impact looks like. But I think we have to go back because number one was great, but it wasn't great enough. So our kids and our staff and our community deserves better. So we have to figure it out, and we're going to go back.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead, Tim. No,
We're going around the horn.
Yeah.
Same thing. I guess I'm not shocked that the second question didn't pass. We split them up on purpose. I'm grateful that 52.5% of the people that voted yes on question one, because it would have been terrible to not have that pass. Agreed. We got to go back. This situation hasn't changed. Hopefully, the rest of the world situation gets better and people have a more positive outlook coming next year.
Yeah, I guess I have pretty much the same thought. I mean, there was a lot of bonds and levies that did not pass, even around our area. So the fact that ours did, I think, says a lot about the community, that they are supporting us. I just think with everything else going on, I think it was hard for everybody to wrap their minds around what a no to the second question really was. I guess I'm hoping that once that kind of flushes out, it might be easier to have conversations without everything else that seemed to be going on with this vote, with COVID as well. So again, I think I'm very thankful that question one passed, and I think we should all, recognize just how wonderful it was that our community did do that.
Yeah, pretty much the same. I think it's the best, honestly, that we could have hoped for, given the circumstances.
Sure.
So we just have our work cut out for us, and we'll tackle it.
Christina, you're still with us. Any thoughts for board forum tonight?
Nope, I just agree with everybody else as far as how that vote went. I'm grateful for what we got, and not super surprised we didn't get the extra, but we have another opportunity, so.
Good. Thank you. Anything else? Daniela?
Nothing really new with me, or nothing new. Just school, volleyball. Nothing new.
Yeah. Probably not. Volleyball.
And I didn't mean to steer it just toward the levy conversation. Anybody have anything else to add for board forum? Hearing none, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. All in favor with an aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Another great meeting tonight, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.